This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
You don't like the Drake?
I hate the Drake.
I love the Drake.
How could you not like the Drake?
Who's
Welcome to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake Comic Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Myers, and welcome to episode 100. This show is brought to you by the BatmanUniverse.net, your home for all things Batman, and of course, Robin, Tim Drake, that is celebrating 30 years this year. We are part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network. We are also a part of Batman on Films Podcast Network at BatmanPodcastNetwork.com. You can get a hold of us on all the social media outlets. We are on Facebook at Facebook.com/EveryoneLovesTheDrake. We are on Twitter at ELTD Podcast. You can find us on Instagram, and we have 2 email addresses, and I think we're going to be switching to 1 here soon. But the first email address you can get us a hold at, and this is crazy, I know, you can get a hold of us at RobinELTDPodcast@yahoo.com, and you can also get a hold of us at ELTDpodcast@gmail.com, and we also have a YouTube page. Episode 100. Introduction. This book documents the reemergence of possibly the most maligned character in comics. Robin, in his many incarnations, has been long considered a fifth wheel, an annoyance, a mere sidekick, the boy wonder seen by many as standing in the giant shadow cast by the Dark Knight. I'm here to tell you that it just ain't that way. But I'm a recent convert to that particular belief. When I was a kid following the adventures of Batman in the waning days of his old look, that's back before they put a yellow disc behind his chest symbol, I thought that Robin kind of got in the way of things. It seemed to me that it would be cool if Batman went solo and left that kid at home, but all my favorite stories had Robin at the center of them. The one where Robin had to dress up as Batman in order to fool a gang of cowardly hoods who had shot Batman full of holes. The Strange Costumes of Batman. The classic story where the cover had me scared that Robin had died. Robin dies at dawn. I was caring for the boy wonder in spite of myself. Then the Batman television show came along, and it was the most severe blow yet for the character. Robin, and in comics general, would be saddled with the curse of holy this and holy that until the Batman movie came along nearly 25 years later and wiped the slate clean again. But in the interim, Robin's status as a character suffered in my eyes. I felt bad for him. He was primarily the target for the satire of the show. He'd become an adolescent buffoon, hopelessly naive and moronically enthusiastic. Back in the comics, Dick Grayson had grown up and soon moved on, and Batman was on his own. He went on lots of solo adventures in the hands of some of the comics industry's greats. It was a time of classic Batman material. The beginning of the move of the Cape Crusader to the Dark Knight. but something was missing. Batman and Alfred, and the Batcave, and the gadgets, and the vehicles were all there, but the stories lacked something. Can Robin have been important to the stories after all? Was Batman without Robin just another masked crime fighter? Just an angst-ridden, obsessed masked man? It wasn't long before Jason Todd, the new Robin, entered the scene. For some reason that the folks in the industry and you the readers at home can theorize until Detective Comics reaches issue 1000. Jason did not click as Robin. Reaction to him was negative all the way around. When the Joker did him in, there weren't too many mourners. Oh, there were those that lamented of the passing of Robin, but none seemed to miss Jason Todd all that much. A lot of know-it-alls, me included, thought that maybe the very concept of Robin was an outdated one. The world was ready for a lone and lonely vigilante, a tormented soul given over to the fight for justice. The comic reading audience was just too darn sophisticated for the idea of a teenage sidekick in short pants. Quite frankly, I felt that way right up until my involvement in the project that you're holding in your hands. I was invited by Denny O'Neil and Dan Rapsler to write the miniseries in which Tim Drake, the new Robin, was to come of age, to earn his place beside Batman and wear the red, green, and yellow costume of those who came before. Denny, the man when it comes to Batman, explained to me that Robin was an important element in the Batman mythos. The dynamic duo, along with Alfred, formed a triumvirate of personalities that made the series work. That trio was the heart of what Batman is. As I went to work on the miniseries, I found this to be true. Even though this was new territory for me, my first shot on a Batman and my first job for DC, and a new Robin for Batman, the relationships were there. The work seemed to have a flow that was not of my making. This was classic material I was handling. There was a reason why these characters have endured more than half a century. Batman, the very essence of the night dark streets and furtive shadows, needs a symbol of light and hope to counter his somber nature. What better symbol than a Robin? Without his young apprentice, Batman is just a bitter man in a hopeless struggle. So I saw the need for Robin. But how did the readers feel? The pressure here was giving Tim Drake all the qualities that would make him the perfect choice to complement Batman, to assure him a place in the Bat mythos. But could we put that across? Would the efforts of Alan Grant and Norm Brayfogle and Tom Lyle and me pay off in a Robin the readers could respond and, more important, like? The answer to that came to surprise everyone, especially the folks in circulation at DC, who had to go back and press a bunch of times on both the Robin miniseries and detective issues leading up to it. It was a mandate from the readers. They liked this Robin. They were willing to make him one of DC's biggest success stories. A hot title, a surefire double-bagged collector's item. So, today's readers are more sophisticated. They know something that took me over 30 years to sort out, and it's going to take a lot to knock this kid off. Robin, A Hero Reborn, trade paperback. Chuck Dixon, April 11th, 1991. Lancaster, Pennsylvania. All right, before we get into the 100th episode, I want to give some quick shout-outs to people that helped make 100 episodes possible, and I want to read a few list of names. These are the thank yous to special guests and co-hosts that have appeared over the course of 100 episodes. Olivia Mullins, Anthony Conrad, Stuart Murray, Tom Panarese, Richard Knepp, Michael and Andrew Leyland, Tim Gerasi, Luke from Gotham Central, Robin the Web Series cast, Andy DiGenova, Justin Kowalski, Peter Vera, Donovan Morgan Grant, Jay Yaws, Chris Clow, Michael Bailey, Jason Chapman, Stephen Harwood, and my two brothers, Terrence O'Neill, who has appeared on 61 episodes, and my other brother, Ryan Haas, who has appeared on 31 episodes. Thank you to everyone, and thank you to Terrence and Ryan especially for helping me complete this journey to 100. This is just a starting point. So, like I like to say on every episode, you're listening to Robin Everyone Loves the Drake comic podcast, and welcome to 100 episodes of
Hello, this is the Irredeemable Shag from the Fire and Water Podcast Network, and you're listening to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake.
This is one of those clever edits I do into the show, and I knew that when Terrence and Ryan and I recorded the 100th episode that was not going to be the original opening of the show, and I'm sure at some point they both knew, like, Rob is probably going to do something different here for the intro of the show. And this is also a way that I get to introduce the little blurb. When I went to Motor City Comic Con earlier this year, I got a chance to have the Jim Lee experience. I get him to autograph a few things, and I was able to ask a few questions to him from the panel that he was doing. So this is the audio of the two questions. He's mic'd. I'm unfortunately not. So I'm having to boost up the audio for the show. So hopefully you can hear the questions I ask him. It's only barely a couple minutes long, but I thought this would be a fitting way to start off the 100th episode of Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake.
How do you feel about Hush finally being animated?
How do I feel about Hush? I'm happy that it's finally happening. It's interesting. I've read some of the feedback already online, and it ranges generally from why did you change the look or the art style? But I know that if they faithfully copy the trade paperback, the sentiment would be, why did you waste my time and try to copy something that is so unbelievably magnificent and amazing? No one would ever say that online. What are you talking about? They would say, like, why are you copying something I've already seen? So I think, to the creators' credit, they knew that there would be that risk because so many people love the original series. But I think it's all about being faithful to it, but also doing something different. So if you've read the graphic novel or the series, it is not a direct one-to-one translation of it. So you will still be shocked at the turns and twists. And I think they revealed the box cover art, and you'll see that there's no Huntress was replaced by Scarecrow. Scarecrow plays a bigger role in it. So I actually redrew Scarecrow and finished the art. So I still feel, I still feel attached to it. So, I'll be curious to see what you guys think.
With that, we know that Tim Drake is getting a new...
You know what? Tim Drake is celebrating the anniversary this year, isn't it? 30 years. 30 years. So let's hear it for Tim Drake. Stand up, sir. Right? It reminded me of this fact. I was like, Tim who? What? No. So
like with that, with Dennis wanting to do something new for Tim,
right,
to go all the way up to the food chain to you guys to improve designs, or go, it's not in the style of the character, or is it pretty much left to the creators to make those decisions?
I would say most of them are done at the editorial level. It's when we do big initiatives where you need to make the line look different enough so that if you put the two together, you don't go like, I don't see a difference. If you don't see a difference, then visually it just doesn't work, right? So that's why Rebirth was more impactful, because of the return to kind of more of a return to the original. So the only thing we ask probably is that they don't change so often that it gets confusing, right? Or if they do something that's really different from what existed before, then it gets higher up. It goes further up the food chain. Yeah.
I'd let him know if I were you. He's not always in such a good mood.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 100 of Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake comic podcast. All three Drakes are in the house, Terrence and Ryan. Let's start with Terrence. Buddy, how have you been?
Hey, long time no chat. I had to cut my Burning Man weekend a little bit short here to fly back so I could do the podcast, but that's okay. And I've been enjoying your interviews, and I've been enjoying the music that you've played for each one. So I think for Ryan and I being here in North Carolina, you've got to play rock you like a hurricane. We may not be here by the end of the week. Dorian's coming for us, and
They keep happening.
Yeah, school started. I'm looking at my old lesson plans, and it's like, oh, school was closed for a couple days for Matthew. And last year, school was closed for a couple days for that other, I can't remember the name of it, last year's hurricane. So
The one that ruined my Mario Brothers screening. That's what
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it was called, but it'll hit me. Florence, I think it was.
Florence. I was about to say Florence.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Rob, before the hurricane
Florence.
takes us away, you got us here. We made it to 100. Congratulations.
That's funny. My sister, we had a dinner. My sister's up from South Carolina, and she's like, I'm glad I'm here. She's like, I hope my house doesn't blow away, but that's funny. I was like, oh, I'm going to go talk to two people that are in the Carolinas. She's like, hope they're not inland or not out by the ocean.
Yeah, luckily both of us are a good at least 150 miles or so from like the beaches and the coast. So we're somewhat
still.
okay. But yeah, our biggest thing is losing power because it's just such a nuisance to not have electricity. But
Yeah.
I guess that's a first world problem. Yeah.
Well, we just heard Ryan's voice. Ryan, sir,
Yes.
it's good to hear your voice, and
Yes.
and had seen you. Why I should say, I feel like it's recently. Now we're technically almost in the month of September, but you and
It's
I.
a decent. I was going to say decent memory. It's a distant memory.
Yeah, it's a
But,
decent one.
It was
wasn't
such
what I
a
thought
good
it
time.
was.
It's such a good time that I personally think the impact of that conference will be last for years, because it really was such a good all around event.
Yeah, like from top to bottom. We've talked about it before on the show, but just a good 3-day event. 2 days being there, but having time in beforehand and afterwards, and just the connections I think that people were making, and then getting to see people like Dan Mishkin and Mike W. Barr, were just some of the icings on the cake, and costumes were there, so that was really cool. That's what this episode is, and if you've been listening to The Road to 100, I've probably said it a million times. Technically, as both my co-hosts are laughing, technically the idea for episode 100 was going to be what you have heard on the preceding 7 episodes was, I'm going to do this, 10-15 minute little interview with everybody, and bam, that's episode 100. What Ryan and Terrence don't know is that Marv Wolfman was supposed to be episode 100 again for the second time, and again that fell through.
What?
So yeah,
You decided to break that on the air?
I'm breaking that down on the air. So
What the heck happened, Rob?
yeah, he's just he said, I'm currently unavailable at this time. So
Didn't the first time he fell?
he
right?
fell, yeah.
So and then your term of it fell through. I was like,
yeah,
literally, actually, yeah.
yeah, literally.
I mean, sometimes I know about this too, just from trying to get people scheduling. It's hard to get regular people scheduled for a podcast. Okay, first of all. Second of all, whenever I try to do stuff for my Mario Brothers site for interviews, or even for BOF podcasts to try to get some comic book creative people on, it's almost and you know this too, Rob. It's whenever they say they can record is when you do it.
That's right.
Sometimes you it's hard, and sometimes you just gotta keep trying and until you actually are able to nail down their schedules.
Well,
don't give up.
No, I'm not going to. But with as far as everybody else is, listening to this, that when he had taken his fall, I had taken a day off of work because he's like, I want to do this at 2:00 in the afternoon, like you said. All right,
yeah, and you're like, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to take off work.
Yeah, I'm going to take off work. Took a vacation day, and then the time was like, all right, I'm sending emails out, and then I'm not hearing any reply. That's kind of odd. We've been kind of corresponding back and forth. And as I'm waiting for a reply, I'm scrolling through Facebook going, Marv Wolfman has taken a fall and is canceling Comic-Con conventions. And I'm like, I don't think he's going to do this today. And I did get a reply later on in the day, sorry, I'm unable to. So that fell through. I'm sorry to keep saying that. But he's doing better. I've spoken to him since then. But a cool thing had happened because of that is I thought I'm going to go to Plan B and do these interviews with other podcasters that I haven't had a chance to have on the show, or maybe they were on way back when, like Tom Panarese was very early into the show. And then this wonderful thing happened. Instead of it being a 15-minute interview, as you've been hearing, they've been coming like hour interviews in and of themselves. And it's been funny to ask a yes or no question and get 7 totally different answers out of the people that have been on the show. Currently, while we're recording this, episode 99.
You should have done one with Rick Shue.
The funny thing was, I had sent out, I was told Terrence this earlier, like if you're setting up a party, okay, I'm going to send out a whole bunch of invites.
Podcast party.
Yeah, a podcast party. If you're having a party for your kids graduating school and you're like, all right, I'm going to send out, a bunch of invitations, you can probably bank on a third or a fourth of those people aren't going to show. I sent out 9 invitations and 9 people said yes, and I only had 7 episodes in which to do it. So there were a couple people that didn't get a chance to be part of it, and Rick Shue was on my short list, and after I got 9 replies, I'm like, I can't send out another one because I don't have any more openings. So the other 2 people will be on future episodes, and they're all cool with that. But this was a celebration of, yes, it's the 30th anniversary of Tim Drake this year, and it coincides with this show, but also it being our 100th episode. Like you had said, Ryan, it's the most everything that we've done is the 3 of us have talked so long of like why we like Tim Drake and going through these issues. It was really cool to get other people's perspectives of where they came into Tim Drake and just all the different answers that we got through it. So that was a lot of fun. I think that was a nice little break for the 3 of us to kind of have getting back into school or work or summer or whatever those things are. So I just want to say a big thank you to both of you guys for being on the show and getting us here to 100.
I just wanted to say a couple things about your show. So the first one was with episode 93 with Donovan Morgan Grant, and I listened to that one and I was like, oh no, he sounds so much better than I ever did. I was like, I was like cringing of like how I sound on the podcast compared to him. I'm like, Rob is never going to have me back on. He's like, I've been working with amateurs, but he is just such a good podcaster.
Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of Rob. Rob was telling us just today that he was going back and listening to old shows and how much better we are now than we were then.
Yeah. Now, I just would say with Donovan, and I really wanted to get Tim Gerasi. He was one of the other ones. Donovan and Tim are the 2 big reasons why this show even exists in the first place. Terrence and I were on Bat Fans, and Terrence was on before I was. And I think I was doing my action figure reviews on YouTube, and just being part of TBU, I got an email from Dustin saying, hey, there's going to be a commentary track for a Batman animated series episode. Does anybody want to be a part of it? I think maybe Donovan was in that. And I said, oh, I'll do one. And it happened to be Robin's Reckoning. I'm like, oh, I love that episode. So I got on that one. We just did a commentary track for part 1 and part 2. And then I got an email, I don't know if it was from you, Terrence, or maybe it was from Tim, like, hey, that was really good. Do you want to come on an episode of Bat Fans? So I did a couple episodes of Bat Fans, and then that kind of started me doing about a year and a half on Bat Fans. And then when Terrence and I stepped down, I was like, I still want to do something. So if it had been
did you step down? Did you fall through?
I fell through, yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. Took a fall. If I had not replied to that email, I don't know if I would have done podcasting at all. It was something I had been listening to for a couple of years, but I really want to thank Donovan for just doing that. And he and I have been emailing back and forth for the last couple of years of trying to get him on, and schedules just, here we are back to talking about schedules again, but it just quite didn't work. So yeah, Donovan was a blast to have on. It was just deep with, information and things that, he liked. And I told Terrence, it's really funny when somebody's like, I like the 1 Year Later costume. Yeah, I love the 1 Year Later costume. I don't like the 1 Year Later costume. Yeah, I'm not sure I do either. I'm like, I'm like a flag blowing in the wind, back and forth. I think I get caught up in whoever is engaging in the conversation at the time. But yeah, Donovan was a blast to have on.
And then the next episode was 94 with Jay Yaws. I'm saying his name Yaws.
Yaws. Yep.
Yaws. He was so cool. He was
that's such a nice dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I was listening to that, and I've never met him. Don't really listen to his podcasts that much, and I'm like, I feel like I know this guy. Like, didn't I sit next to this guy at lunch? Like, didn't I meet this guy at the comic book store, and we were like talking about like some graphic novel? Like, he just had that like feel of like I've known this guy before. He was really cool.
Yeah. And, he and I are doing the Everyone Loves Young Justice podcast, and that kind of got spurred. We were doing that. I think we had recorded 2 or 3 episodes beforehand, and I was like, I'd like you to do, the 100th episode of The Drake. And he said, I would love to. But like you said, he's like right from the get-go, hadn't spoken to him other than through Twitter and just sending messages back and forth. And instantly on the mic, he was, like you said, like somebody that I would play in a band with.
You're talking about the Young Justice podcast?
Yeah, the Young Justice podcast, yeah.
Okay, I thought you were talking about episode 100.
Well, no, saying that we had recorded a couple episodes of Young Justice and said, hey, I'd like you to do the Drake 100th episode, which would become his own. But even on Young Justice, just very, very cool, very easy to talk to, and he is a musician. He plays bass, so we have that rhythm section, banner back and forth of shorthand. So he was another a good get on, and really cool guy. Comics Now, go check out his show. He's doing a fantastic job over there.
Mm-hmm. And to do a second degree of Kevin Bacon type of plug, we also had Jay Oz on BOF episode 139, which was one of our, what I like to call evergreen shows.
That was a good episode.
It's dissecting Batman's no guns, no killing rule. And that's where I got like a podcast all-stars from around the community because I wanted varying opinions and stuff. So that has me, Chris Clow, Scott McClellan from the Suicide Squad cast, and Jay Oz. Storied and eclectic group of people talking about that no guns, no killing rule, and it is a fantastic episode.
Oh yeah,
not because I'm in it, but because it's a great discussion.
Yeah.
So 95 is a guy who I would like to be on a podcast with one day. I've interacted with him on social media back and forth, and that was Chris Clow, because the thing about Chris Clow is he's so smart, he's so intelligent, but yet usually people in this like field of like pop culture critiquing who are really, really smart are such arrogant jerks, which maybe I
he's like he
is able to be so brilliant and so intelligent, but yet not come off as arrogant,
not be an a-hole,
and
very humble.
Exactly. And that's so rare in this like field of what people are doing. So I really admire the stuff he's written and the things he's been on. And didn't he get started on Batman on Film? Wasn't he on like the old show? Yeah.
Well, that's why I literally just brought up that same Batman on Film 139 that Chris is on as well, because he loves Batman, he loves Superman, he loves Spider-Man, but he's very well read, well articulated. I can't even say well articulated.
Not like us.
And well articulated.
He reads good.
He talk good. But he's great, and he did get his start on BOF. He's both writing and on the podcasts. We actually. It's kind of funny, like we're like almost the same age. We're a couple months apart in age, and we both started on BOF in maybe the same month in 2006. We both were doing comic reviews. I think he was doing Nightwing, and I started off doing Robin. And so we were both part of BOF that whole time, and then he's gone off from there and has done all kinds of stuff like on movies.com and things like that. So.
Video game consoles, podcasting.
Comics on consoles, and he's got that Discovery Debrief Star Trek podcast, and he's great.
Yeah, you want to talk about being, intimidated by, some of the people that are on there. Chris was one, like, normally I'll have loose notes. I was trying to really stick to notes and, like, I don't want to screw up in front of Chris, but like partway through, it was just like, he's just a dude. We're just talking, and
you were like, "You talk good.
you talk so purty." No, but yeah, that was a highlight of doing that. That was somebody that I had been wanted to have on, but that was like, I don't know if I'm gonna. I almost chickened down and didn't send him something.
Oh,
yeah, but I was so glad I did, and
that's why podcasts like that. Part of being a podcaster is almost being self-serving and like, I just want to have a fun conversation with this person or that person, and that whole Road to 100 series was such a good like excuse, I guess, to get somebody on your show and have a fun conversation with.
There was no homework. I mean, it's fun when the three of us are reading books and talking about them, which is,
but we are only so much fun.
Yeah, but I can only do so much. But when you just have that moment to just sit down and talk to somebody, that's where you can kind of really start to dig in and like, we like the same stuff.
Yeah. Episode 96. Andy DiGenova. I want to be Andy DiGenova when I grow up. I mean, he just seems like he lives the coolest life. Like, he's always like so chill and laid back
and chipper. Hey, he's just downright chipper.
Yeah, and like, oh yeah, I'm just living in China now, and I work. I don't know if he wants to say where he's got a cool job. Let me say that he's posted it on some social media what his job is, and I don't know if that's private.
Well, he works in the no. I mean, he works in the theme park.
Yeah.
We could say that. Okay, yeah.
Like he said that on shows.
Oh, he has? Okay, yeah. So, he just a cool guy. And I loved it in the beginning when you played his Nightwing kind of...
that was amazing.
Such a great Nightwing.
Yeah, we had him on the audio drama,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when I was hearing that again, it was making me realize what made that audio drama so darn good, which I know we'll talk about later. But it's because it wasn't actors. It wasn't people who this is what I learned in my third year of acting school. It was just like
Rick Shue was in that, isn't it?
Okay, except for Rick Shue. Yeah, except for his part. It was just so it had that feel of just like people doing it for fun, and it had that feel of just like, I don't know, like it was coming out natural, and his audio clip, you could use that to blackmail him if you listen to it. Show you something down below. Yeah.
Well, Terrence always goes there.
Yeah, I know. I can't help it. Yeah.
Just go back and listen to episode 69.
Yeah. And then the next one is episode 97 was Justin Kowalski, and he is another one who's just like the coolest guy on earth. Like,
you've been on one of his shows because you won a contest.
Yeah, and he was so nice because my audio was like crapping out on me, and it was not working. And he was just so nice about it, not like, all right, well, we'll just have to like do this some other time and never call me. Like, he tried, and I'm like, I don't know what's. Every time I'm on someone else's show, my audio is terrible, and I'm like embarrassed by it. But he reminded me of that guy in high school. You know, that guy in high school who was just like super cool, but yet he was like into nerd stuff. And you're like, why does he get to be into nerd stuff and is still cool, and yet I'm the nerd into nerd stuff? We're like
the same. Everyone likes him.
Yeah, we're in class and the teacher's like, what? Everyone has to say their favorite show, and I'm like Star Trek, and people are like, nerd.
Did you wear hats and Vans though, like Justin Kowalski?
Yeah, I did not. No.
So that might be part of it.
He seems like on social media too, like he's a great father, great husband, great podcaster. Yeah. He's just like all around like super cool, but yet
he sounds like a jerk.
Yeah.
Oh man, he's a fantastic Batman.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He was our Batman. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's done so. I mean, he was part of BOF for a couple years there, and we did lots of shows together. I think like my favorite shows with him, like go back and listen to like I think it's like 96.5 or something, where we like have a big, not knockout drag out fight per se, but a very heated back and forth on all the perceived issues of The Dark Knight Rises. That's one of my favorite episodes. Because we really like. We settled the debate essentially in my favor on that episode, and
I remember him crying in defeat at the end of it, right?
Yeah, he said like, "You really changed my mind, and I'm glad we had this show." So, but yeah, and he's like done a lot of. He did the show branding for Everyone Loves the Drake. He's done the show branding for the upcoming. Yes, by the time this show's up, the Agent of the Bat Azrael podcast should be well along, hopefully. But yeah, he's done the branding for that. He sent me a Goomba head from the Mario Brothers movie in the mail because he's related to the people that worked on the movie. Like,
wow.
So he's a cool dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like in high school. There'd be like some kid hanging out with you. Like, why are you hanging out with us? You're way cooler than us. Like, well, you should be with those popular kids. Like, what are you doing here? And that's what he reminds me of. Sorry, what were you gonna say, Rob?
No, I was gonna say. Speaking of branding, he is also has done the branding. Knock on wood. I haven't got the final images yet by the time we're recording this, but he's doing the all-new layout for Everyone Loves the Drake. And there are T-shirts now for the podcast. What? Courtesy of Everyone Loves the Drake, Justin Kowalski. So, he has done all of our new rebranding, and we have our own personal Robin R logo that you can have on a mug, a cup, a pillow, a throw blanket, a Ramones CD cover. There you go, Justin. So thank you, brother.
And episode 98, I just listened to it just a couple hours ago. It came out about 10 days ago. Tom Paneris, he was great. He's so knowledgeable of like the 80s and 90s comics. Like, he just pulls these Teen Titan issues, just like in issue 27, in issue 55. I'm like, how does he remember that?
That encyclopedic comic knowledge.
Yeah, but then yet he's like an old grandpa, like, but I haven't read a comic since 1994. He's like, I looked at the solicitations for New 52, but when I saw who was writing it, I threw my computer out the window and went and burned down the local comic book store. And, maybe I'll read Young Justice one of these days. So, but had you done? He'd been on your show. Had you been on his show?
No, I have not. That was, he was planning that. I think he got into doing a couple other podcasts. He was doing one. He was trying to set up an interview with Chuck Dixon, which I haven't gone back and actually found out if he had gotten through yet, because he's covering the Marvel, the Nam books that Chuck had written, back in the 80s, 90s, or wherever. And I think he was just starting that. He was trying to get that off the ground, so pop culture kind of slipped behind a little bit. So he's like, we were trying to work something out, and I think time just got away from us. That's the fumbling answer there.
And as of this recording, episode 99 is not out. Who is on that one?
That is Mr. Michael Bailey. He is one of the first podcasters that I can remember listening to, aside from the Gotham Knights podcast. I think that's what the podcast was that turned into Bat Fans. He's like the grand poobah, as he's referred to. He's on the Superman homepage, from Crisis to Crisis podcast. He has Batman Bailey's podcast, and Views from a Long Box is one of his big podcasts that he has. And right now he has the Overlooked Dark Knight, where they're looking at comics from the 80s and 90s, actually 70s and 80s, and then the animated series comic books that don't get a lot of love. And he's doing that with Andrew Leyland. Fantastic guy, and was one of the first podcasters I looked up to, and was extremely nervous about asking him to do the show. There was a Superman Tim Drake crossover that I chickened out asking him to be a part of, right, as I was getting the show off the ground. So I asked my good buddy Stu Murray to do that episode with me. I think that was episode 16. I think that's what that one was. And then I got up enough gumption when the audio drama came out. He does the voice of Jor-El and Mr. Oz. So
okay.
He's just fantastic. Go check out Michael Bailey. I cannot recommend his shows enough. And just one of the coolest guys. And he is currently at Dragon Con right now I believe that's in Georgia. And he hit me up. He got asked last minute to facilitate the 30th anniversary of Tim Drake down there and run it. He's like, I'm not a Tim Drake guy. He's like, but I know somebody that is. So he said, I have this blind spot after the 2000s of what Tim Drake was doing. So I actually helped him write.
You should have just sent him your panel from from the Batman conference.
And that's kind of what I did. I sent him the bullet notes from that, and then a bunch of slides and images so we could have. So I think right now, as we are literally recording this, he just finished his panel at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So for Tim Drake. So I'm kind of curious how that went for him.
Yeah, and I guess let me just say a big thank you to all those guys who are on the show. And also a big thank you to all the listeners who've been listening the past 100 episodes, all the great people who interact on social media. And Rob, in all seriousness, you started this podcast. You've made it. There's so many podcasts that start and fizzle out, and you do all the work. I just get on and talk. Ryan comes on and, we just kind of talk. You do all the editing. You do everything.
I've said it before that I'm part of way too many podcasts, trademark, but this is always like the most effortless podcast to be on. It's such a joy to be part of this podcast because I do fun things. And not that the other podcasts aren't fun, Rick. Although I know Rick's not listening because he doesn't read comics or listen to podcasts. He just wants to talk about Star Wars: Force Ghosts. But it's fun to be able to just chill out, read a couple of Tim Drake comics because it's ever so painfully slowly going through all of the chronology, read a comic book, just get on a show, talk with my buddies, and have a good time with it, and then that's all I have to do. I don't have to edit a show. I don't have to do anything. There was one show I did. What episode was that, Rob? Do you remember that I did the introduction for, and I did your job for one episode?
Yeah, and I can't remember which that was because I have been.
It was like a show where was it one of the after the washing machine explosion where like it was half of the episode where you and Terrence were talking, and then I recorded like the intro.
Yeah. So that had to have been right around like 69. Well, no, it was after that. It was probably right around the 80s, probably like 84, 85, something like that. It wouldn't be an ELTD podcast if I didn't make some error, have to make some edit here. Hello, everyone, folks. The episode that I was trying to remember off the cuff is, I was close there. It's actually episode 78 that Ryan did the intro for, and he explained that we were going to do this King Snake story, and Ryan had actually got sick during the scheduled time of that podcast. So Terrence and I regrouped and did a single issue of the Robin Impulse story, and then Ryan tacked on the intro to episode 78. So, okay, back to the show. I wonder how many edits are going to be in this episode. Hey, it's the Drake. It's what we do. I'll go back and edit because I'm going through them as we're going through the show. Since we've done that, going back through the road to 100, I did want to ask you guys a couple things. I think we've probably talked about a couple of these before, but what led you to join this show specifically, and what was your history with podcasts before? What was the first podcast? What led you to go, oh, hey, I'm going to check out this podcast. What the heck is it? Let's start with Ryan.
And you mean podcasts in general, listening?
Yeah, podcasts in general. Why did you even think to seek one out?
So I think, well, and I don't think I know, a lot of people in the geek circle would attribute their love and interest in podcasts directly to Kevin Smith. Mm-hmm. And that is where I first heard about what a podcast was and everything. And, Smodcast, the podcast that, the main flagship podcast that Kevin Smith does with Scott Mosier most of the time, is that's one of the longest running, oldest podcast. I mean, there were other ones around the time, but I think he started those in 2006, 7,
something like that.
Yeah, when podcasting was really new. And I even got into Kevin Smith because of my friend Matt Whaley, who's obviously, you've been on some shows, BOF shows with him, Rob, and he's going to be my co-host for the Drake podcast, and not Drake, the Azrael podcast, and he might have it, but he got me into Kevin Smith, and then before Smodcast, and around the time Clerks 2 came out, there was Kevin Smith said that he was going to do he was going to record an audio commentary that you could just download on your phone and then go into the theater and listen to it while you watch the movie in the theater. But that ended up not happening because people started saying yeah, but people are going to be pulling their phones out in theaters, and people are going to think that you're trying to record the movie, and it's going to be weird, people aren't going to understand it or something. So that didn't happen. But what ended up happening was they ended up making a Smodcast. And I listened to Smodcast day one, right when it started, episode 1. And that was my first podcast. And then it just kind of went on from there with other interests that I have ended up being podcasts. And most notably after Smodcast, of course, it would be Batman on Film, because I had read Batman on Film since I was a middle schooler, since 2008 and since 1998 when the website was new. So I've been reading BOF since I was a kid, and then eventually I started writing for the site in 2006, doing Robin reviews as a 18-year-old or whatever, and then BOF around the time The Dark Knight came out in 2008. I know my dates. They started, the BOF podcast started, and then I listened to that religiously.
All right, up next on the Batman on Film podcast, the end of year podcast, is longtime BOF contributor Ryan Haas. How you doing, Ryan?
Hey, Bill. I'm doing good.
Okay, Ryan is on today to talk about the Arkham Knight video game that was released back in June. Ryan did a 100% completion review that was posted on Batman on Film a few weeks ago. If you're a gamer and you are a big fan of the game, it's a really good review that goes through, well, the entire game. That's why it was 100% completion. So, Ron, just before we get started here, what was your overall thoughts about the rollout and the delay, and then just the whole release itself when it finally hit the store shelves back this past summer?
Well, the whole hype surrounding Arkham Knight was gigantic. I mean, if you compare it, like, it's almost like the equivalent in the video game world is like The Dark Knight Rises a few years ago, because when the original game in this franchise came out, Batman Arkham Asylum, it was totally unexpected. People were blown away, but the game industry as a whole was just like, this is pretty revolutionary, especially for a licensed product. And so every game released in the series since then has been as good as you could hope for in terms of quality and story and everything. So they had hyped the Arkham Knight up so much that it was, this first major game like this on the next-gen consoles, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One and stuff like that. And for the Batman fans, it's supposed to be a story that, like, ends the trilogy, ends this part of the franchise, I guess.
Yeah, so it kind of went from there, and then just listening to other podcasts, it's Batman, Kevin Smith stuff, and video game stuff is usually what I like. And of course, there are so many podcasts now that any interest has something for you. Like, we've talked about it on this show even. There are multiple podcasts dedicated to Jim Varney's Ernest P. Worrell, and they are fantastic. If you guys look up, I mentioned this before, if you look up Ernest Goes to Podcast, it is one of the most buoyant, articulate podcasts you will ever listen to, and it's a character analysis show about Ernest P. Worrell, and it is amazing. So I love that, and that kind of stuff has always inspired me to do other things, that trying to fill gaps that aren't in the internet that I'm trying to fill, like the Super Mario Brothers the Movie Archive, which doesn't have a podcast but probably should, and this upcoming Azrael podcast, because the one doesn't exist and I want to make that happen. So I like being part of that world and trying to contribute to things and have and trying to represent. I'm not saying I'm the best of fandom, but I'm trying to create a place somewhere for fandom to be good.
That's cool.
And I think that this show is very important to support that in a lot of ways, and it's great to be a part of it. In terms of, like, me podcasting, that started in relatively recently, although I've done, it must be hundreds of podcasts. I ended up doing a few podcasts here and there related to the Super Mario Brothers Movie Archive website, because other people that had podcasts would want to interview me and my partner Steven Applebaum about that movie and about our work on the website. And then I was already a fan and had done stuff for Batman on Film, and their podcast stuff got overhauled in late 2015 is when it relaunched, with Bill and Rick, and then following year in early 2016 was when Bill and Rick and Justin and then me all started doing the BOF podcast together, really leading up to Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, and then we did that for a couple years, and then magically somehow I'm completely in charge of the BOF podcast now, and I'm just doing it all myself, editing it myself and facilitating shows and having to be the Rob of BOF podcasting. So I'm trying to make life easy and fun for everybody on that show, and then do all the hard, heavy lifting for that show. So
what do you got, Terrence?
Oh man, so I first Batman on film kind of came on my radar when Batman Begins came out, but I don't think they had a podcast at that time. I don't think, right?
No, not until The Dark Knight.
Yeah, it was just their website, and I was going there to get some information, so I kind of knew about that, and I had really just kind of lost interest in a lot of this stuff at that time and I really enjoyed your guys' panel at the Bowling Green, but one thing that was kind of missing that is a little perspective that you guys just couldn't go into, but that period when Batman and Robin ended and Batman Begins, that dark time, it wasn't.
Those were the dark ages of being a Batman fan.
Yeah, because
for real,
it wasn't just that we didn't have a Batman film coming out. There was like very little momentum towards a Batman film, and the only DC movies that came out during that time were Steel with Shaquille O'Neal and Catwoman with Halle Berry. So it was like
amazing.
It was just awful, right? So when Batman Begins was coming out, I really didn't have much interest in it. But then,
even if you go back to our BOF shows talking about Batman Begins, like people like Rick even said like it was such a hard sell at the time, it being a reboot. Rick was like, I thought that was, why would I care about this? Who wants to see another Batman movie after Batman and Robin? Yeah, it was such a stigma. And even that many years later, can you imagine that happening today? I mean, Spider-Man gets rebooted after 2 years or 1 year or whatever, and there had to be that number of years for a Batman reboot. And reboot was a brand new word.
Well, and that was the thing, too, was like that image of the Tumbler had come out, which was so foreign from any Batmobile we had ever seen. So we were kind of like, what are they doing?
What?
And the thing I kept hearing, and maybe this was from the studio, maybe it was just from fandom, but that it was a prequel, that it was going to be a Batman prequel, and then at some point it changed to reboot. So I don't know if that was just because prequels were big because of Star Wars, and that's how they were selling it, but...
My theory on that is because the movie was so different that prequel was the only buzzword that anybody related to it was able to attribute to it. Like, it's a prequel, but only because it's Batman's origin, and we haven't seen that before.
Yeah.
Much in the way of when this Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix that's about to come out, when that movie first got announced, what was it announced as in the trades? A Joker origin movie. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that's not what this film is.
Yeah.
In any traditional sense of the word. So.
Yeah. Oh man, that opened a can of worms. Now I want to talk about the Joker. Forget me. So Batman on film was on my radar because of that, and as I started to like Batman Begins and all that, it was always in the back of my mind. So then The Big Bang Theory, I think it was the first season, I started watching that, and I hadn't got back into comics.
Oh my gosh, that started in 2005 as well, didn't it?
2005? Yeah. And there was an episode where Sheldon and this other guy got in a big argument about Battle for the Cow and who should be the heir to Batman.
Gosh.
And I was like, what are they talking about? And they mentioned Jason Todd on it, and I'm like, did he just say Jason Todd on it? Like, it was so foreign for me at that time that they would talk about this on TV now.
Oh, on TV. Yeah. You know what? The Big Bang Theory also mentions the Super Mario Brothers movie. It was the punchline of an entire episode. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
And now, like, everyone knows who Tony Stark is and Iron Man, and like it's the world has changed so much, and for the better. But so that got me back into comics. So I went back to the comic book store and I was buying the Grant Morrison title, and I'm like, what the heck is going on in this book? Like, I had no, and I'm like, it's good. I could tell it's quality. And Tony Daniel's art was amazing, but what is going on here? So that led me to the internet to start looking for just some answers, some synopsis, anything, and that's where I found the Batman, the Dark Knight website. I forget what it's called, Dark Knights or something. Gotham Knights. That's what
Gotham
it was.
Knights, yeah.
Gotham Knights. And they had a podcast, and I didn't even know what it was. I was just listening through it on the computer. I didn't even have it on my iPod or anything like that. I just click and listen to it. And those guys had no clue what was going on either. But I was like, oh, at least I'm not alone. Like, they would review the comic, and so the two of the guys on there, actually three of the guys, Gary, I think his name was Gary, Dane, and Tim were on the podcast a lot. And then that site collapsed. The guy who was running it in England quit it. It's gone now. Those three guys moved over to the Batman universe, and at the same time I started listening to the Batman on Film, the very first rendition of it with all the people, and really enjoyed that podcast. And then I'd listen, and Bat fans was Dane and Tim, and then I think Gary left, and it was Dane and Tim. And I really wanted to be on a podcast. I'm like, I want to be on this. I want to talk about this. And I had this feeling.
Yeah, that's how I was for years. I was like, I want to do that. I can do that.
Yeah, I just wanted to do it. So I'm like, I think these.
I talk good.
And this is. I'm no Chris Cloud, but I can speak.
Rob, you need to cut all these together and make that the cold open.
It's got to be. It's on my note. All I wrote down is I talk good.
Yeah. So I thought, you know what, Dane and Tim, these guys could be my in. If I could just stalk them and just write them fan mail, maybe they'll have me on as a guest. In crayon I wrote a big thing, I talk good, and mailed it to them. And I cut out letters from the newspaper and put it in and put me on the show, or else. No. So, and this is really lame to say, I'm kind of embarrassed by this, but what the heck. I would write them emails all the time, oh, that was a great show. I didn't even listen to the show. I just see they posted a show.
Now, okay, so the first part of that was fine. Because I was like, oh, okay, sure, you're being a fan. The second part is borderline insane, Terrence. Come on now.
I wouldn't have time, and I'd say episode.
Wait, no. That is the equivalent. You've mentioned this before. That's the equivalent of people writing these weird, long, well, no, maybe not weird, but these long pontificating letters to comic books. And being outlandish just to get into the letter section. Remember, you were saying that people just they didn't even read the episode. They're just trying to get noticed.
But keep in mind, I did say it was embarrassing. So
you did because you said it. You said it was embarrassing, and then you said part A, and I was like, well, that's not so. Oh, okay.
Yeah. and then I wanted Tim and Dane used to always complain that no one listened to the podcast. Oh, I don't know why we're doing this. No one listens. And then on one of the podcasts, he goes, "Oh, no one listens to this." And I think Tim's like, "Well, I know one guy listens," and he goes, "All right, well, Terrence listens, but what's it?" And I was listening to it on headphones, and I was going for a walk, and I came running into my house. I'm like, "They just mentioned me on the podcast. They just mentioned me on the podcast." But in my mind, I was thinking gee, I don't even really listen that much either. I'm the one fan mail. So they invited me nice enough on the show, and I was pulling it up. It was episode 15, and it was from October 26, 2012.
This week we have a guy named Terrence. Terrence, say hello to the good people. The good two or three other people that listen to this podcast besides you.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me on. Be hard to top Bob last week. He's like the guy who invented Batman podcasting, but I'll do my best. So.
I'm sure you'll do fine. But yeah, Terrence is an old listener of ours. He came over with us to the Batman universe, and he's one of only 3 people that reviewed us on iTunes, so that's pretty good. And he's only 3 or 4 confirmed listeners that we have, so yeah. That's pretty good.
It's much appreciated.
By old, do you mean long-time listener or just old in general? Because I think I've got you guys beat by about a decade, so.
I think both ways.
Yeah, because the other week Tim said he was 9 when Batman the Animated Series came on, and I was 19 when it came on, so I know I've got beat by a decade.
Finally, I'm not the oldest one on the podcast anymore.
Yeah.
Thanks, Terrence.
Wow. And so I did the show with them, which was crazy because Dane is in Hawaii and Tim is in California, and I'm in North Carolina. And, back to 2016, Skype and the internet wasn't quite what it was, and I don't know how well the internet is in Hawaii, and we would have all kinds of audio problem, and we would have to record when Dane got done with work in Hawaii time. So
is this where that was, where you guys were staying up late and do weird stuff
in the morning? Jeez. In fact, on one of their episodes, episode 5, which I was not on. It actually says the synopsis for the episode starts with, after 5 hours of internet problems, the Bat fans got a chance to sit down and record a podcast. And like that was par for the course sometimes. Like sometimes the sun would be coming up and I'd be like, oh my God, we're still recording. And so then eventually Rob joined the podcast, which I had that somewhere. It was like 2013. I had the episode somewhere you had on that. Right here. July 5th, 2013, episode 33. Rob joined.
Dane had mentioned how he hates on podcasts when the hosts talk about what they're drinking. So just to tick Dane off, I want to let him know I got a big can of Diet Mr. Pibb right here. No, I'm not really drinking Diet Mr. Pibb, but if you watch The Simpsons, you'll get that joke. So.
Yeah, right. And we also have. Hey, Rob, who's Ellen? Is that your wife?
Yes, it is.
Oh. I almost said Ellen, that's right. but we have Rob from the Point 5 cast. He's here to give his thoughts and let us know how he feels about life and his trials and tribulations. So, Rob, why don't you tell us about those?
Life is great, and I'm tribulation-free at the moment. And I was just going to say, Terrence, I'm drinking the better version of what you are. I'm actually drinking Diet Dr. Pepper.
Ah, cool. Well, I'm actually really drinking green tea with lemon because I'm trying to quit soda, but, you know.
And I am really drinking Diet Dr. Pepper. So.
Okay, yeah. And Dane is furious now.
I guess I'll just mention I'm just having some plain old Aquafina water in a bottle.
Okay.
And that's where I got talking to Rob. But between all the technical difficulties and the late time, and my wife had trouble going to sleep if I was still up in the other room talking and all that, we just kind of couldn't keep it going. So I had to leave, and then Rob was leaving. They've continued. They're all the way up to like episode 180 something or something.
Yeah.
At 184 was their last episode. So they're still going strong. I still write them a fan mail every week. No, I'm just kidding. But love the episode.
Hope they don't listen to this show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then so then I was like, I still want to do this podcasting thing. I just don't want to do it with someone who's in Hawaii time, and I had to stay up. So I thought, well, Rob would probably want to do the podcast, and I know Rob loves Robin. He talks about Robin all the time. So maybe I could convince Rob to do a Robin podcast. So I sent him an email, and I was like, hey, Rob, you want to do a Robin podcast? And Rob was like, well, I kind of already am starting one, and I got this thing. And Rob was like,
so you asked him, so you had semi-simultaneously had the same idea,
Yeah.
But it was after Rob had already started kind of pre-recording ELTV?
Right. And it wasn't that I was burning to do a Robin podcast. I just wanted to do a podcast, but I knew Rob liked Robin, so I thought that might be my hook to get Rob. I sent him a letter to crayon. I said, Robin is good. Want to talk? And then he's like,
talk good, Robin talk.
Yeah. He's like, I already got it. And so, but Rob was like very gracious, like, oh, why don't you come on? Why don't you be on it? Why don't you do it with me? And I was like, well, it's your thing. I don't want to intrude. I'll be have me on as a guest. I'll do a guest spot.
Well, at that time, Rob, why were you not like, a podcast needs a co-host, so be the co-host. Like, otherwise, I'm literally just talking by myself for an hour and a half every episode.
Yeah, that's how it was for a while. I think you did episode 5, and then you didn't come back on till like 12, and then it was like 16 before you like officially joined in. At that point, I'm like, just friggin' say yes.
Well, yeah, you had a few people. Yeah, you had a few guests, and I kept saying I want to do Prodigal because I really like that storyline. And you had a few people lined up. So I think it was like a year or a year and a half where I wanted to be the co-host, but I didn't want to just step on Rob's toes. And Rob wanted me to be the co-host, but he didn't want to intrude on me. So it was literally insanity. It was. We hemmed and hawed for like a year and a half of like, well, I'll be on it if you want me to be on it.
This is why Rob did like 28 episodes without us, Terrence.
Yeah. He
I'll
wanted
show
us
you
on.
guys.
He just did it. So I think it was Rob's wife who said, "You guys got to stop being girls and just ask each other or something like man
Do you know
up."
what?
Yeah.
Do you want to know what's funny? And I am not making this up. As I was, talking about this, she goes, "You remember when you and Ryan were like, and you and Terrence were in love with each other, and you were like, do you like me? Yes, no, or maybe?" And you both kept circling the maybe box.
Yeah.
She's like, "Just friggin' do it already."
Do you like me, or do you like me, or you just
yeah.
So then I think we were just permanent co-hosts, and then I still clearly remember it because to me, the gold standard for podcasting and Batman podcasting, but podcasting was the Batman on Film podcast. Like that was always to me, so, no offense to anybody on the BatmanUniverse.net or any other podcast, that always was like, that's the top, that's the peak, that's the apex.
Well, what helped BOF was that BOF
original,
started out. Well, they're authoritative, definitive,
dadgum
original.
Yeah.
So the site already had clout. It was like one of the first fan sites turned legit sites.
Yeah,
that there was, and then so it had that built-in audience, and that really helped get people on board the podcast quicker than building a podcast from the ground up. And then it didn't hurt that the podcasts themselves were fantastic.
Yeah, the podcasts were fantastic. Bill definitely had some inside information with the Nolans and definitely didn't abuse that and, just put up any rumor mill kind of stuff. There was an integrity to that podcast as well. So then I remember Rob texted me one day and he's like, "Have you seen Twitter? One of the Batman on Film guys mentioned our podcast." And I was like, "No, the Batman on Film guys, no way." And
how did you skip? You skipped forward a few years there.
Yeah, well, it was just me and Rob talking about Robin. It wasn't really much that happened. It was like nitpicking every minute detail of every panel. Some artist had to churn out for a deadline so he could pay his rent, and here's two 40-year-old guys nitpicking it.
That should have been green. He colored it blue. Jackass.
Exactly. Look at all the blue in this.
Muscles up the continuity.
There's no way you could type a keyboard that fast. The keys would melt. And so
how does Chuck Dixon write every book?
Exactly. He's farming it out like Bob Kane.
Like Bob Kane?
Yeah.
He's like, when I say Dixonverse, I really mean the sweatshop where
exactly.
I have. There's lots of people.
Chuck Dixon's house, he's got all these people chained to keyboards. Yeah.
You type good faster.
But so then it was psych. I was like, "Oh man, who is it? It's Ryan. We got to get him on. We got to make him a co-host." And I thought
you went straight to co-host instead of maybe we should get him on a show.
Yeah, well, I think we said get him on a show, and then when he came on and everything was going so good, it was like, "Hey man, we got to get this guy as a co-host." And I thought too, if we had 3 co-hosts, it'd be easier because then we could just get 2. To record, but then it's no one wants to leave someone out, so now it's just become harder to try to get all 3. But I think it's worth it because it's fun to talk to you guys. So
yeah,
and then I was looking forward to leading up to 100, and then Rob just cut me out of the whole thing leading up to it. He's like, "I'm going to talk to these other people and play with their toys," and so, but that's my story of podcasting. Just lies, cheating, and deception. Yeah.
Well, scum and villainy, that's, you almost did the Batman mantra right there.
Yeah.
I had a couple other questions, but I kind of want to go through some other ones, but I think we've all said this before, so maybe just what is it about Tim Drake that still connects with you? And you said I just wanted to do a podcast, but you've been around here for almost 100 of these things, and Ryan has been here almost for 30 or 40, if I'm getting my numbers right here. But what is it about Tim Drake that connects with you? And not why you want to do the show, but what is it about Tim specifically for you guys that the character still resonates 30 years later? Let's start with Terrence on this one.
So the thing I liked about Tim Drake when I first read it was that I saw a lot of myself in him. I think Tom Panarese mentioned it in episode 98 a lot about the change that was made in Tim Drake, mostly from Jeff John and Jeff John's era, where they made him some super intelligent genius who was arrogant and kind of had a dark side too, and that's not evidence in the books that we've read so far in the beginning. And being a young kid, he was a young kid. He was riding his bicycle to the, the Flying Graysons circus. I was riding my bicycle, and he seemed like a smart guy, but never super intelligent, never arrogant, which I guess he became in later renditions. And what really has surprised me is just how the quality of these books that we were reading and the integrity in a time, looking back in perspective, in a time when Image Comics and these gimmicks were just dominating the market, and there was, as we saw, Guy Gardner Warrior, which I can't believe Justin Kowalski pulled his Voldarian roots. Like, it's just at the top of his head, like Voldarian powers. It's like, holy crap!
Well, that's when he had all the tattoos and stuff,
right? The tattoos, and he could
which we talk about that if we ever cover Detention Comics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I got my copy already.
Same here.
But it was just a good quality comic book that I think a 12-year-old, a 20-year-old, a 40-year-old, a 60-year-old could all just read and enjoy. And it never said like, oh, let's try to be Image. As so many others, circa, oh my God, remember what they did with Wonder Woman, where she had the black spandex and like the blue top, and Booster Gold was in like an Iron Man suit, and it just was an awful time. Even the Return of Superman, those like 4 possible Supermen looked like they came right out of an Image comic, especially the Eradicator and stuff, and Robin stayed like just a good, solid, classic comic book. That's what drew me to it back then. It's why I still like it now.
Ryan.
I mean, as a character, Tim Drake, I've always thought he represents. It's funny that to me that it took 3 Robins to get a version of the character that represents what that sidekick partner and what the meaning of Robin is as a symbol and companion to Batman and his mission. I mean, his original inception of Robin is more like, well, let's give Batman a kid partner so kids that read the book can see themselves, fighting alongside Batman and everything. And then it got a little wonky around the Jason Todd stuff. And, it was organic, but it was a little messy. When they did all that. And so, but Batman himself is always able to remain pretty. I mean, they're never going to change Batman forever. Right. Like you get your Azrael, you get your Dick Grayson taking over. But Batman himself, Bruce Wayne, is Batman, and he'll always be Batman. And he'll always represent what Batman represents. But it's interesting that Tim Drake is the third in this line and tradition of what Robin is and what Robin means, and I still think he's the best example of that. And secondly, I've always thought that he's the best Robin because he is the best of them. He's got the best potential. He's not necessarily the best fighter or whatever, but he's got the same detective. He might surpass Batman as the best detective and stuff like that. So I just think that he's pretty versatile in terms of how he's been used both with Batman in his solo book as Red Robin, and I just like what he represents, and I think he's the best version of Robin. He doesn't need any gimmicks other than that to be a good character.
Hey, and there was a moment too with the Tom Panarisa interview where I said, I could really relate to Tim, and where he wasn't super genius, but yet, as Ryan was just saying, like, it makes him the best of the Robins too, because we saw him become the best of the Robins. We saw his training, and he mentioned the one Teen Titans issue, which I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's the one where Tim goes and trains with Dick, and they're at like the circus, and they watch the merry-go-round for
65.
65.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And Dick is
the only place of dying, right? Like in that arc.
It's like a couple issues after that.
Yeah. It's after.
Oh, it's not part of the arc.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But it could fit.
Because I remember reading that.
Yeah. If they put it into trade paperback, it would go seamlessly. But there's one of those. Dick is like, well, have you been paying attention? Did you notice the guy with this? Did you notice that? Did you know? And Tim's like, no, I didn't think to. And I'm like, that I can relate to that. I could, like, even now, my wife will be like, "Oh, did you do the laundry? Yeah, of course I did. Did you put the soap in? Of course I did. Did you put the bleach in? Oh, okay, I'll be right back." Like, it's very human, but yet he's also the best of them, but yet he's humble at the same time. So it's really just a great character.
So this is my weird segue. So as much as we are gushing about Tim Drake, we have an event coming up in Young Justice, which the book, or issue 8, I saw the colorist just received his comps for issue 8, and he was saying in the video I was watching that the book should be out in a little bit. Tim Drake is getting a new code name, and currently right now, this is the first that I've had a chance to talk to these two guys about the color and the costume for Tim Drake's new Young Justice. So with issue 100, or episode 100, I was thinking we were going to be able to talk about his name. We don't know it, but we know his color scheme. And it looks like Tim is working for UPS with his outfit. So this could turn into a whole other episode, so maybe we can kind of truncate this a little bit. I will point you to Young Justice episode 8 that Jay Yaws and I talked for a half hour just on the color scheme of Tim Drake, but I wanted to hear your guys' thoughts, and if this becomes the rest of the podcast, it is. Happy 100. What do you guys think of the color scheme of Tim Drake's, and how do you feel about it? Where are you, or what? So let's start with Eeny, Miny, Ryan.
Okay. I mean, I will preface this with, I always am a believer of give a thing a shot. Experience it first and then critique it. That's why I do things like insane things. Terrence might even think this is like ridiculous. I don't like Gotham, but I watched every single episode of Gotham, so I can tell you unequivocally that I really don't like that show. So number one, give things a shot. Number two, you need context to really evaluate things, and a truncated, zoomed in panel of one shot of a book where we don't know all the information, we don't know the code name, we don't know what the story is. I am not up to date with Young Justice as you are, Rob, so I can't exactly comment on how the story is going, but having said all that, I really hate it. I don't like people that read comics usually don't like change anyway.
Right.
But when it's your favorite character and when you know the code name and costume changes, it makes you question, well, why would I like this character then? He's already in a team book. It's the only book that he's heavily featured in, apart from the guest star here or there in like the recent Tom King stories or whatever. And it immediately makes me think of the New 52 Teen Titans, where it's like Tim Drake, it's the only book he's in, it's a team book, he's there, but his costume's all off and everything's kind of like, it doesn't feel like him and stuff like that. So without even the Robin moniker, without even anything resembling it, it makes me think of like Guy Gardner, warrior from wherever. Like is it going to be so different that it just sucks all of the, I'm not going to say integrity of the character, but all of the reasons why that you identify with him or enjoy the character in the first place, but comics are like that, and people know that, and the industry is built around exploiting that sometimes, where they will change things because they want you to question, they want you to wonder, they want you to buy the comic book to read it and find out. Sometimes that works great, sometimes it backfires and people are like, well, I'm not reading this. But yeah, just in general, I I don't like it. It just feels like they've taken my favorite character and make him look like a weird hot cyber tech UPS guy, generic hero 101, and I don't like it.
What Jay and I had said, I feel like this, and again, to your point about Gotham, I read every single New 52 Teen Titans because that is where Tim Drake was, and I can say unequivocally, I do not like it. It was not good. There were a few issues here or there, but that wasn't like, I read one issue and I'm gonna toss it. So on the page, like something that Jay said, he's like, I don't know what super terrific name you can come up with that I can look at the costume and go, oh, okay, I get it. He's like, we could be surprised, but the story has not led itself. It's not like the history.
It's like you, whenever you change something like this, it's almost like it has to be better than what it was before to justify changing it, or have a story implication so important that it makes sense. Azrael Batman, the whole story's built around that. Rick Grayson, bad, I hate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so, I don't know.
Terrence.
I mean, I interrupted you, Rob. I'm sorry, but I just wanted to make that thing, because those are some other examples I can think of Batman characters where it's like, here's one where they changed it on purpose because they wanted people to react, but the whole entire story is built around it. And like the Rick Grayson thing is like, what is this?
Yeah.
You know? The Rick Grayson. Oh, God. Yeah, that's so bad.
Like the way that they recently talked about that in Tom King's City of Bane run was pretty amazing. How they danced around it, where who was it? Was it Batgirl that tried to contact all of the other heroes, and she was like, well, I got everybody I could, this person's out there, that person's out there. They didn't even mention Azrael. They should have said Azrael's in space.
Right.
But Dick is Rick, and Batman's like, yeah, I know. Or something like that. Like, Batman just said something like, yeah, whatever. I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, what'd you have, Terrence?
Well, the last time they changed him to a burger joint, Red Robin. So maybe they'll keep the restaurant theme, and he'll be the Brown Derby, because that's the famous, And he just needs a little hat, like a little bowler hat. And he's like, but
for the love of God, no.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat as Ryan. Cautiously optimistic, but not excited by it. I do like what Brian Michael Bendis has done at DC, because I just feel like, I feel like he's just playing with all these toys and bringing out characters that we haven't seen in a while, like The Question and Manhunter and Event Leviathan. I like what he's done in Superman in action. I know a lot of people haven't, but I thought his Superman was genius, because every time you read a Superman book, it's boring, because if Superman's in a fight with somebody, Superman's going to win and he's going to be okay. But yet,
Terrence, did you read the Rebirth regular Superman book that Tomasi wrote?
Yeah, that was good. I enjoyed that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that whole book is and I think, to your point, this is a tangent, I'm sorry, but that whole book is like it's angled towards Superman as a family man, and it was a book about that,
right?
Instead of like,
exactly.
Is he going to win this? Is Superman going to win this issue? But it was more about
like how will
the
Superman
family
handle
stuff,
things as a parent.
Yeah.
And it was really great. It was really good. But that's what I thought was great about Brian Michael Bendis, was that you can't threaten Superman, but you could threaten his family, and that makes him vulnerable. And so the attack was coming towards his family, and then everyone freaked out, like, don't mess with his family. But that, like, I don't know, I could go on a tangent here, but that was like, I don't know, I thought there was suspense and drama and what's going to happen, because we didn't want anything to happen to his family and nothing to happen to Lois and all that. But neither here nor there. Let me just say, I'll wait to see what he does. But the thing about DC, I'm very down on DC right now, and it feels like they just have no continuity, and no one's running the ship, and Dan DiDio cares more about putting books in Walmart than other things. And is Jeff Johns' Doomsday Clock where DC's going, or is it Brian Michael Bendis' thing, or is it what's his for Scott Snyder's? Right, the Batman who goes to Hot Topic,
there's so many different events that feel like they're the most important thing in the DC universe to read, but like they're all happening with these superstar writers and these little separate
nothing's connected. And Batman's got City of Bane.
Yeah, exactly.
Justice League, he's got every bone broken, and he's talking to a starfish. But then over here,
who is also Robin.
Yeah, exactly. And then Gotham City's being taken over by the Hot Topic villain guy, and then the it's just like Harley Quinn at the same time was in Suicide Squad.
She's in everything at once.
But yet it was over at her own book in Coney Island the whole time, and yet they have all these alternate parallel universe books, but they don't even say Elseworlds or anything on them. They just come out, and you're like, oh, they're all zombies in this book, but they're all, White Knight in this. So it's just like, it's such a mess right now that I almost feel like the Young Justice book might be an island unto itself, and this may happen, and it may not affect the continuity, and it may be like the Harley Quinn thing where Tim Drake is Robin over here in Batman hanging out with Damian, but yet he's the Brown Bomber over here in Justice. Young
I think it
Justice,
depends. I think it depends on what the story actually is. If this is going to be like if it's going to be like when Stephanie Brown became Robin, that was like it was supposed to be longer than it was, right? But then it ended up being like 3 issues or something. So if they're changing it for a reason, there's like a plan to be like, well, this is a self-contained story, and by the time he's done, it'll be whatever, or it'll be like, I don't think it'll be he's Robin in these other books, and then Brown chug it down with some Brown and to make it Always Sunny in Philadelphia reference in Young Justice. I think it'll be one or the other.
Yeah. Like currently right now, the team got together. It took 6 issues to do that. 7th issue, they're lost in the multiverse. And in issue 8, again, because I saw the video, the colorist says, wait till you see page 16 and 17, the splash page that I colored and what Brian Michael Bendis wrote. All you Tim Drake fans are going to lose your mind. So that
in a good way or a bad way.
So it's not like A Lonely Place of Dying, where he finds Dick Grayson trying to convince him, and we go through this 1.5-year process with Tim Drake that you can go back to the podcast starting at episode 1 and follow Tim's trajectory to when he finally becomes Robin, and it's earned. Like, Tim at no point is questioning, well, should I be Robin? Should I not be Robin? I don't know. So going from issue 7 to issue 8
oh my gosh,
is the change. Like, there's...
Yeah, that is a great point. Like, back in the day when comic books were great because of nostalgia, they took... That has been our point. And maybe that was something that I should have brought up earlier about, like, why I like Tim Drake. They took their time. Like, that first, like, Lonely Place of Dying arc is about Tim Drake recognizing the importance of Robin, and then, as you can attest, in listening to this podcast, his whole character trajectory, they spent, what did you say, like, over a year, right?
Yeah, a year and like 6 months, 5 months, something like that.
In the book, slowly building up this character and stuff, and to have him literally do a change like this in a team book,
right,
where he's not the focus, he's going to get like 2 pages out of a 22-page book to explain this or something. Like, that's a great point, Rob.
Like you said, not trying to throw darts at somebody's work. I want to read it and make judgment.
Yeah,
but like,
that's our benchmark.
Yeah, like, is it earned, and does it honor what the 30 years that we've been talking about, or is this new 52 change for the sake of change? And I don't mean to sound disrespectful. I'm Brian Michael Bendis, and I want to do this with these characters, and I want to change this and tweak this and do that, and then that's my thing. I don't know if that's what that is. Again, we'll see.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Hey everyone, Rob here. And this is a special news report that at the time we recorded episode 100, we recorded it a week or so before issue 8 of Young Justice was due to come out. There were some conflicting reports of when issue 8 was going to come out. I think CBR and some other comic book resources and different websites were kind of getting some facts screwy with all of us, and I think they were trying to report on when issue 10 was going to come out, which is going to be the Naomi issue of Young Justice, where she joins the team. So they were talking about Tim getting a new code name and Tim getting his new costume and saying when books were getting pushed back. So there was a lot of shuffling in the decks. So when we recorded episode 100, we didn't know what Tim's name was. So Terrence and Ryan and I recorded what you've just recently heard, the first half of this, and I started doing some edits on it, and then the review copies came in of Young Justice, though, a couple days before the actual issues hit the newsstand, and Terrence and Ryan and I got to read Young Justice 8 before everybody else in the world basically got to read them for, review purposes. So Terrence and Ryan and I immediately hopped back on some version of the mic. Terrence was unable to join in because he was in the middle of a family vacation, but he sent a little audio sample that I'm going to play here in just a few minutes. But first, it's going to be Ryan and I. He and I got together really quick and recorded about a 12-minute thing to just talk about our initial reactions of what Tim Drake's new codename is. Now, by the time you're hearing this episode, Young Justice 8 has been out. We all know what his codename is. It is Drake. So we'll let that be here. So you're going to hear my first initial reaction to it, and Terrence's and Ryan's. And then I reached out to Jay Yaws. I was going to have him guest on episode 100 for a segment, thinking we were going to get the code name before we recorded it. We didn't, so I reached out to him. He and I talk about it on this. I also released the Young Justice episode 9 recently, and I took a sample of that and put in our most recent episode, since it happened in Young Justice, and the Young Justice episode 9 was going to release before 100. So yeah, those of you that have listened to the Young Justice episode, you've already heard Jay's reaction, but it's a little bit longer. It's about 14 minutes. And then a good friend of the show that I haven't had on yet, he's done a little bit pieces for us, Jason Chapman and his cousin Steven do a show that they recorded a little segment for me as well. So you're going to hear their intro music and theme to their podcast, and then they talk about the Drake as well. So this is all of our first initial reactions. Ryan, Jay, Terrence, Steven, and Jason Chapman. And then when we come back on it, now that almost a month is gone by, I will come back and give a little bit more of what I really think. And I've also done a Facebook Live event where I talked about it recently as well. So some of this you may have heard before, but you're going to get a live reaction. So here we go.
Breaking news.
That's just how we're going to do this. Hey, everyone. It's Robin, a very awkward Robin Ryan here. At the time we're recording this, it is September 6th. Shh, don't tell anybody, but you're going to hear this. You're going to hear this like September 25th is going to be the 100th episode, which you're listening to right now. We have just found out Tim Drake's new code name to go with the brown costume. 3, 2, 1. Drake. No,
what?
That's not me counting in.
The rapper?
The rapper, yes. He is going to be a rapper. What? No. They are going to call Tim Drake, Drake. Drake. Ryan, what are your thoughts on the name?
Can you change the name of the show to Everybody Doesn't Love the Drake? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I once I found out about this, I was like, Rob. I think the name's Drake. What are they doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, it's cute and clever, and I get it, and it makes sense, but I still don't like it, and I don't like the way it plays out in the issue either, really. I mean, we talked about it offline before this recording. That's what spurred to do this recording, and I was like, Well, he was Robin, and I like that. And then he's Red Robin, and that made sense. And he had a whole series. We've talked about this. He's had a whole comic book series exploring that and that character and what that means. And his identity and his mission was tied together in that series. And then he remained Red Robin and has been through costume changes as Red Robin. And then got to be just Robin again in this Young Justice thing. And then I don't know. I mean, why we? I said is it going to be in this actual episode?
Yes,
we just talked about that. Okay, so you heard our earlier thoughts on it, and my big thing was like they can call them whatever they want as long as it feels organic and it's part of the story and it makes sense and all that kind of stuff. And the way it plays out in this issue, it's more like, hey, I need a new name. You know what your new name should be? Drake. And I'm like,
sorry, I'm trying not to laugh.
But I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, you've explored the Young Justice series more than I have, but that's just, to me, I'm just reading it and I'm like, why? You know?
For those of you that aren't following Everyone Loves Young Justice, and you should, it's got Jay Yaws on it for crying out loud, and me. But issue 1 started out with, Tim Drake, Robin lands on the hood of a car in front of Jenny Hex, and she says, "You're Robin?" He says, "Well, one of them." And it's not like over the preceding, 7 issues, because this is issue 8 that we're talking about, it's not like he's been having this crisis with who he is, what his identity is, like, Damian is Robin, I really don't know. And I've really enjoyed what Bendis has been doing with Young Justice. Let me just say that right up front. But I equate this to Ryan and I hanging out in BG and me doing something stupid or silly, and Ryan goes, "You know what you should call yourself? You should call yourself Myers."
Yeah.
To me, that's what it is. It's not like the history for Tim Drake where he's trying to convince Dick Grayson to be Robin, and then he takes it upon himself. And then you get this long 1.5 almost story of Tim earning the Robin costume or earning the right to acquire this code name. I think it would have played out more organically if it would have come off as something like that, where there's 2 or 3 arcs where Tim is coming to this moment when they get out of the multiverse and they get back in DC proper, where Tim says, "Bruce, I would like to make a change, and this is what it is," and it's organic. It's not your best friend, Captain Chuckles, off to the side giving you that name. So my initial take is, I don't hate it. I don't love it. It's just, I don't know if meta is the term that I want to use. It's just, it's there. And that being said, I don't know what name you could have used. If he was in a red scheme, would you have called him Cardinal, Sparrow? I don't know. I was kind of hoping for Cardinal or something like that, but even then, I'm like, all right, Cardinal's a bird. So we've got an audio sample when Ryan and I are done. Terrence recorded a sample through Facebook that I'll play to give his thoughts. If I'm one of the two ways of Ryan's really not liking it and Terrence is kind of okay with it, I'm in the middle. His point, and you'll hear him say it, that Tim is kind of the forgotten Robin. So if nothing else, it's putting the Drake right out there in front of everybody. Like, hey, this is Tim Drake. But,
my thing is like, that's the potential, but it also has the potential of being like, making things more confusing. Like,
right.
It could make him fade into the background more, and it's not. We've already commented on the costume, how it seems like this generic superhero kind of thing, and with a name that's a little bit muddled, or it just takes it's harder to figure out what the focus is, right?
Right. Yeah.
When there's not a solo series to really explore that, and he's, quote, just a part of a team, and that's the only real place you're seeing it. I think it runs the risk of being only people that are super fans keeping up with it to know what it is. Right. Because Robin is going to be Robin, Nightwing is going to be Nightwing. If you're a big Red Hood fan, I mean he has his own sect of fans, and so Tim Drake does kind of turn into the forgotten Robin, but at least Red Robin had Robin in the name, and now it just feels like maybe it'll end up being this thing where it's just like, who's that character? He used to be Robin? Well, that's weird and confusing. I don't care. I hope that doesn't happen, but yeah, that was my first inclination, and just like you joked, I was like, well, what are they going to do? Are they going to call Batman Wayne, or
Wonder Woman?
Or are they going to call Nightwing Grayson? Oh. They already did that. That's the thing. They've already done this. It's not even an original occurrence at this point in terms of the Robins. They've already stripped. They've done this with. I literally just realized they stripped.
Until you just said that, I have not even thought
I didn't
never
either.
Done this with any other character.
I was going down the list and I was like, "What are they going to do?" Name Nightwing Grayson. I was like, "Oh wait, that's exactly what they already did." And and to my point, he had his own solo series called Grayson.
Yeah.
Yes, and people, I haven't read it, but everybody that said that they've read it that I've talked to said it was pretty good.
Yeah, it was decent. I mean, it didn't set the world on fire, but it was okay. But it all led back to Dick Grayson returning back to
Nightwing. See, and if that's not kind of the plan for this, I don't know. It's just going to feel like this weird, unnecessary thing. Yeah, and to differentiate, Now with the whole Grayson thing, they really do need to differentiate this. And maybe it's a fake out. I mean, this is only issue 8, so the name has been brought up. And issue 9 is supposed to be the actual costume reveal, right?
Right. Now, I had said, I think in this episode that you're listening to, wherever I piece this in at, and I also said it in the Young Justice episode, that I think I was mistaken. I read it on, and again, I know Newsarama is what it is, but the headline is DC pushes Young Justice back 5 weeks. That is actually, Young Justice 8 was coming out on the 11th, which you should already have read by the time you listen to the show. So they were talking about issue 10 being pushed back issue 9 being pushed back 5 weeks, which is the costume reveal. So we got the name in this issue. 5 weeks from now, we will get the costume reveal. So it's Newsarama. I'm not trying to plug them, but their headlines are a little misleading, the way they put that all together. So I don't know what name you could have done. I think I land back on was it really necessary, or is this the part of a writer that wants to put his stamp on this character, so it marks it in this space and this time, like, oh, hey, look what I did to this character. And I'm not saying good, bad, indifferent, or whatever. It's just it's kind of like the New 52. Like, you go, oh, that was from Brian Michael Bendis' run. That's where that comes from.
And sometimes in retrospect, that stuff does help, because I can go through old comic books, and even within the actual Batman continuity, sometimes you really do kind of associate eras with story things like this, or name changes, or really costume things is stands out to me. I'm like, oh, this is Nightfall. Oh, this is No Man's Land. Oh, this is like the New Gotham era, or whenever Kelly Jones and Doug Minch took over Batman. Those all have really distinct styles, but that's the thing. Like, the story, as long as the stories are really good, then that's like a secondary part of it.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm holding out on. And I think I even said in this episode that as long as it feels like Tim Drake and it sounds like Tim Drake, costumes change and all that stuff, but I'll go with it. And so far, Bendis is writing a pretty consistent Tim Drake. So yes, I would love a solo series, but if he still is finding the voice for Tim, or is still using the voice that he's using for Tim, I'm okay with it in a name and a costume. Once he starts sounding not like himself, like in the New 52, that's where issues are. So I thought I would gather Ryan really quick. You're going to hear an audio sample from Terrence, and then I'm going to get ready to introduce Jay Yaws, since he's on the sister podcast of this, and that's where we're really going to talk about this at. And the time that this issue comes out, we have a Young Justice episode coming out before this reveal happens, so we can't talk about it on that. So he's going to help celebrate 100 with us, and you get to hear his thoughts. So we're going to kick you over to Terrence really quick, and then after Terrence, you'll hear a little blurb discussion like I just had with Ryan. So,
oh my gosh, what a 100th episode bonus!
Yeah, this was not planned. So happy 100th episode, Drake fans. And
if anything else crazy happens in the next couple of weeks, we might just tack on, another hour to the show. It'll be like a 4-hour show.
That's right. So, all right, we're going to kick you to the rest of the episode, and let us know in the comments what you think of the Drake. And hey, at least I don't have to change the name of the podcast.
Hey guys, just real quick, the new name, I like it. I don't hate it. I don't love it. It feels a little bit lazy and quick, but at least it's on brand. It's not something way out where I'm saying, where did they get this from? Like Savior or and it's not named after a hamburger place. So that's good too. I do think it may bring some more attention to Tim Drake, who Tim Drake is. Tim Drake, he won't be necessarily the forgotten Robin that, oh yeah, well, who's that guy again? He may get more like notoriety. So a lot of people, I think, don't really know him as much as the other Robins, and so maybe this will help. I have a lot of faith in Bendis and where he's going with it, so let's just see where it all leads to. And comics, whatever you don't like, well, they'll just retcon it in a few years, and it'll all be back to how it was eventually. So there you go.
All right. Well, we've already heard this next gentleman's voice on our road to 100, but since he is tied to the Drake now, I've finding a way to put all my friends on podcasts about Tim Drake, our sister show, Everyone Loves Young Justice, and that this is the 100th episode, like you just heard Ryan and I, and then Terrence just a few seconds ago. We got Jay Yaws here on episode 100, and had said initially, I think in Young Justice, and even talking to you off mic and just throughout the week or so, like, oh, if any big news breaks for Tim Drake, I'd like to, have you on, obviously. And then we were like, well, we're not going to get anything really. So we just kind of went on with our normal 100th episode that we had planned. And then this dropped. So I'm like, really frantically going to Terrence, Ryan, and Jay, like, hey, you guys want to hop on? You want to talk about this thing that just hit? So, of course, by now it is the 25th that you guys know. Issue 8 of Young Justice is already out. You've read it. We've probably talked about it on Twitter many times before you have heard this episode. But Jay, now that we know what Tim Drake's name is, how do you feel about it? How do you think it was presented? Everybody's kind of heard me talk about it already, but we can get to a little conversation if you like, so you can kind of pick my brain and stuff. But I'll let you go first on this. Your initial feeling, and are you for it, against it? I'm going to stop talking, so go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I am not overwhelmed, underwhelmed, whelmed. I'm not really anything. I don't know.
I feel like it's, and this is one of those conversations that Ryan was, I straight up hate it. Terrence is more like, all right, I can see behind it. Maybe this is shining some light on, the forgotten Robin, just by putting it out there that his name is Drake. You're instantly going to know who it is. And then Ryan gets into the whole thing of like, Bruce Wayne might as well just call himself Wayne. Like, if Tim Drake is there in front of somebody he knows and they ask him like, oh, well, what's your name? What should I call you? And he says Drake, they're going to go, Drake, like, Tim? Is that you? Like, I don't know if that thing's going to happen. You and I had this discussion on Young Justice that we could have a whole laundry list of names. People were talking Sparrow or Talon or Cardinal, all these different kind of things. And I don't know if anything would have been satisfactory. But the point you made in the Young Justice episode a few weeks ago was it's uninspired. Like, everything is safe. Like, Elvis Brown costume is kind of meh. The name is kind of meh. I don't know. I don't want to like speak for you, but that's kind of where I'm feeling. It's just I don't know. It just seems very, well, it's safe.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I wouldn't go so far as to say I absolutely hate it, but I really don't like it, at least the way it came about. Like, in context, I'm not a fan. I mean, ignoring the fact that, just the silliness of, oh, it's his last name, so that's just going to be his code name now. Going so far like, oh, is Superman going to go by Kent? And is, Wonder Girl going to go by Sandsmark? And, everything. Besides that, it's way too, it's way too on the nose, first off. Even then, it's like how it comes about in the story, I don't like it. because he effectively gets the idea from a villainous version of himself. Right. And I don't know, that just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like, why is Tim deciding to change his name after he has a run-in with like an evil Tim Drake from another Earth? And yeah, I mean, I didn't like it in that way, and it's Drake is a bird, but who said that they had to stick with a bird-themed name?
Right?
It's almost like they were. It's almost like somebody realized that, a drake is also a type of duck, which is a bird, which goes along with the avian theme of all the robins and everything. There we go, we got it. Like, they thought it was much more clever than it actually is.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just it's whatever.
Sorry, I'm not laughing. Like, all of us are having the same just stuttering reaction. Like, I can't formulate sentences due to the conflicted ways I'm feeling about all of this.
Yeah. And I mean, I can't remember exactly how, like, my rationale and how I phrased my position when we did the episode a few months ago about the road to 100 and the Tim Drake interview. We'll say it, but I listened to the one that you did with Michael Bailey the other day, and I actually kind of came around to his point of view. I think he stated it in a way that makes sense, and I've almost made peace with it. That at this point, Tim has to become somebody new. He has to have a new identity, because as Tim Drake, everyone loves him, and everyone loves him as Robin, but, whether we like it or not, Damian's Robin now. And even though there are ways that they could have both of them be Robin, the way that the stories in DC are going right now, that's not going to happen. So Tim does have to, quote-unquote, graduate into his own role. So I in the way he put that, got me thinking, and kind of made me change my mind. I mean, as much as I'd like to have Tim stay Robin, and I'm one of the weird ones that doesn't even mind the Red Robin moniker.
I don't either. I will go on record and say I was perfectly fine with him being Red Robin, and I don't think of the restaurant either when I think of that. I can compartmentalize that.
Exactly, and I mean I'm fine with him being Red Robin if he has, like, even if they went back to the 1 year later suit, or even the Red Robin suit. I like it like that. Having him into his original suit, or kind of derivation thereof, like he's in now, or coming out of Rebirth. I don't think the Red Robin name fits so much, but in some of his other costumes, it worked fine. But if they are bound and determined to give him a brand new identity that's separate from Robin, I mean, as long as Tim still gets to be, a hero, and gets to be the hero that he is, I'm fine with it. It's been a long week, sorry guys. But the way Michael, put it was like he almost needs to out of necessity. It's just, this feels completely uninspired. Even in the text, it doesn't feel like a natural choice for him. Having, because really the name Robin as a code name sounds better than the name Drake. Yeah, it's almost like they had the idea and they forced it in there, and now they're just running with it, having everybody in the story say how cool it sounds. Impulse saying it's right there. It's like, well, we're not going to call you Alan. We're not right. So I mean, it's not logical in the story, the way that they're doing it. It doesn't feel natural. It feels like they had the idea. They were almost mandated for the idea. They need to find some way to include it and almost make it I'll throw in, the Mean Girls thing here. They're trying to make fetch happen, and fetch isn't going to happen. But we're stuck with them not succeeding in making fetch happen here.
If that was the mandate, then I wish that was built into the story of, we kind of talked about it in the Young Justice podcast discussing the first arc of, all right, we're getting the band back together, and we're trying to learn how to play the music together as a team since it's been so long, and all of that stuff. There hasn't been this existential crisis on Tim Drake in the back of his mind that, when he went to the Hall of Justice and put on his Robin costume and came back out, it's not like he had the line of like, this just feels so foreign to be back in this costume again. And, where he's been gripping with this for some time, laying the groundwork. It's the buddy that farts in the car beside you and goes, you should call yourself Fart. And then it's like, oh, that's funny. It's not even Tim deciding to name it for himself. It's Bart Allen doing that for him. And then, like you said, the Drake that was going to literally kill him in 2 seconds before Bart grabbed all the bullets and then saved him, that even Bart and Tim both like, yeah, you should change your name to that. Like you said, the evil version that was going to kill you, you want to take that guy's moniker.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's an excellent point. The fact that Tim is not wrestling with his identity. He's not saying, I don't feel like I'm a Robin anymore, or this doesn't work, this doesn't fit. There's none of that there. I mean, if anything, the only thing you could say is in the first issue, he introduced himself as Robin, and then in this issue, he introduces himself as Red Robin.
Red Robin, yeah.
But, either way, he's not struggling with his identity, so he's not questioning who he is. He knows who he is as Tim Drake. He knows who he is as Robin or Red Robin. He hasn't been wanting to find something. Now, I mean, if something happened and it was part of the story where he felt like the codename Robin had been, sullied, or he was no longer worthy of it, then okay, that might work. But yeah, it's like, did you ever watch Futurama?
Off and on, a few episodes here or there.
Yeah, there's an episode where some of the main characters get superpowers, except for the robot in the show, who is just a robot. So, I mean, he already has, like, strength and everything. But they go out and fight crime and everything, and they come up with superhero names for themselves. And Bender, the robot, calls himself Super King. But, like, halfway through the episode, they run out of this cream that gives them superpowers. One of the other characters says, El Zilcho. And Bender says, El Zilcho, is it too late to change my superhero name? That's what that felt like. It was, like, in the story, it just felt like he was like, oh, that's cool. I think I'm going to do that. But even then, the how it's connected and how it came about, I just was not a fan at all. It could have been worse, but it could have been better, and the way it could have been better is just not doing this at all.
Right. Well, this is what I wanted to do, is kind of get some first reactions, since it literally just hit us today on the 6th of September, but you guys will have obviously read it before we get there. And, I mean, this is the way to celebrate the 100th episode of the show and the 30th anniversary of The Drake, which... at least I don't have to change the podcast name to,
that's true.
to something different. So
now it's just
I know you and
Drake. Everyone loves the Drake.
Drake. And I've always said, my favorite character is Tim Drake, and my favorite superhero is Robin. All the different variations of Robin. I just bought the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figure 2-pack of Damian and Raphael because I'm a Robin fan. Tim is my favorite Robin. Tim is my favorite character. This is just going to take some while to digest, and we'll see. But, Jay, thanks for coming on. I wanted to get your quick reviews, and I know you and I are going to have plenty more to talk about over at Everyone Loves Young Justice podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Rob. I wish I had some, more... positive things to say, but I mean, I'm glad to be part of it anyway, and congratulations on reaching 100 episodes. I don't remember which episode I came in on listening to the show, but I do remember binging it all to catch up, and it's become, one of my favorite podcasts, and I love doing the Young Justice show with you, so congratulations on 100. Here's to 100, 200 more.
Cool. That's a lot of work. Hopefully no more costume and name changes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to go right back to your regularly scheduled program in 3, 2, 1. Drake.
Pizza Pizza Hut pizza to go. I said a Pizza Hut pizza to go. I said Pizza Hut pizza to go. It's time for the Good Night Baby, a little relax song. This appreciation podcast. We appreciate it.
Say, Steven.
Hey, Jason.
What makes a good James Bond story?
Well, to me, a good James Bond story is whenever James Bond isn't going rogue. Stop going rogue!
Exactly, when he's on a mission.
Yeah.
This is a regular mission. What makes a good Mission Impossible movie?
Well, I'd have to say the same thing. It's whenever Ethan Hunt doesn't go rogue. He's just on the mission.
Mm-hmm. So
Stop going rogue!
What makes a good Batman and Robin story?
Well, I'd have to say when it's Batman and Robin.
Exactly. And since I was reading comics from back in the day, now here's where I start ranting. When I was reading comics back in the day, there was no story where Robin was constantly mad at Batman or Batman was too brooding to have Robin around. I mean, that's the comics I read as 7, 8, 9, 10, right?
Yeah.
And so then around the mid-'80s, they just thought it was a good idea to have Batman on his own or kind of, and then no more Batman and Robin. Robin was in his own Teen Titans series, which I could live with because he eventually grew up and became Nightwing. And then they brought another kid in named Robin, right? But when I was a teenager, they brought the third Robin in, right? Because the second Robin died.
Yeah.
And his name was Tim Drake. But what was the greatest part about Tim Drake's character, he was my age at the time.
Oh, wow.
And so he became Robin the same, at my age. So I could definitely relate,
yeah,
to that Robin. Well, 100 years later, I'm pretty old now, 2019, and they've changed that character to, instead of wearing the classic red and green and
like
black and
what
yellow,
I remember seeing on the TV show.
Yes, exactly. Now he's brown.
Brown.
And his name is they changed his name, his superhero name.
What's his name as a superhero?
Okay, his real name is Tim Drake, right?
Yes.
His superhero name is Drake.
Huh?
That is stupid.
Is he a duck?
I don't know. He's brown. How? He's not man duck, How do they think that was a good idea? Man duck? No, we can't name him man duck. We'll just name him Drake. No. If I'm
that ought to be my superhero name.
James Bond, he goes by 007.
007.
Right? Tim Drake goes by
License
Robin or Red Robin, not Drake. That is the stupidest thing. How do you hide your secret identity if you're using it as a superhero name?
Yeah.
That is the stupid. Bruce Wayne doesn't go around. Batman doesn't go around as Wayne, does he? Oh my gosh, it's Wayne Man. He doesn't do that. I mean, why do these writers in Hollywood take the core values, the core stories, and just left field these stories? Oh, let's make a James Bond movie. We haven't done that since a movie ago where he went rogue. So let's let him go rogue now.
Yeah.
That's like the new James Bond. Here's some bad news. I haven't talked to you about this. But the new James Bond, he's just Bond. He's not 007.
What?
They got it. Apparently what the rumor is, he will be coming out of retirement. So he's not he's not even James, he's not 007. He's just James Bond. And the female 007 needs his help.
Oh,
apparently that's what it's supposed to be.
So is Bond still, I guess he's no longer, are you saying that he's no longer a 00?
No.
Oh,
so,
crap.
I'm tired. Just give James Bond, whichever Bond you want, white Bond, black Bond, just give him a mission to do, and, for...
Just like the good old days whenever Sir Sean was still on there.
Yes, just for Queen and country, go out and do your damn mission.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Same with Mission Impossible. They're always going rogue. Just give Ethan Hunt a mission, go do it, and it's over. Batman or Robin, just give Batman or Robin a villain to beat up, and just give me those stories. Every time I get interested in reading a comic, I kind of find out from my friends Olivia, Stu, and definitely Rob what's going on, and it's the same story where Bruce Wayne doesn't want to be Batman no more, or there's someone else's Batman, or Batman gets hurt again, and it's the same story since this comic miniseries called Nightfall. It's the same story. Bruce doesn't want to be Batman. Batman gets hurt. Someone else is Batman for a while. No, give me something new. I'm tired. And poor Tim Drake, his costume has changed several times.
That's about as bad as Hawkeye getting sick of liver and fish.
Yes, on MASH. Yes, exactly. But at least it wasn't the same episode over and over and over again.
That's true.
So, I hope eventually they change Tim Drake back to Red Robin, or there's already Bruce Wayne's son is now the new Robin, but, give him something else besides Duckman, We don't need Duckman.
No, because that's going to be my superhero persona.
Oh, okay. Well,
I want to be Duckman.
We don't need Drake.
Quack,
everyone loves the Drake, like Rob's podcast.
Yeah. I did know that.
Yeah, but we don't need a superhero named Drake.
Yeah.
That's my beef.
Okay, then.
All right. Well, thanks, Rob, for letting me rant on your show. And check out our show, Good Night Sleepyhead, with me and Steven talking about music.
Same old business.
Yeah.
Nobody needs a picture of a man stoned away in a casket. Nobody needs a picture of a man stoned away in a casket.
All right, in my new final thoughts, like I said in the live stream the day that the issue came out, that I'm warming up to the idea. Is it the best name in the world? No, it's not. I think it could have been worse, and I don't want to rehash everything that you've just recently heard, and you can go back to the Facebook live stream and see my full reaction there after having read it, and I think I had 4 or 5 days ahead of the actual street release. If anything comes out of this that is the positive, I'm trying to find the silver lining or the brown lining in all of this, is I'm looking at it from First World. It is saying unequivocally, that must be the word on this podcast recently, that this is Tim Drake for us, the reader. Yes, I know we can get into the whole headcanon weird thing, like he's using his last name and he's going to save somebody from a burning building and they're going to go Drake, like Tim Drake. I don't know if it's going to be that much on the nose, but it also on the same token that you have Connor Kent that's calling himself Superboy. He's not wearing a mask. You have Ginny Hex. You have Cassie Sandsmark that's Wonder Girl, and Amethyst. Like, they're going by superhero names, but there's nothing disguising their face. So you could go that route that maybe Tim should not wear a mask. I'm just saying, for right up front and personal, we're going to know this is Tim Drake. So somebody doesn't have to go, Sparrow, who's Sparrow? And for somebody to say, oh, that's Tim Drake. So yes, it's on the nose. It could be ironic that it's Drake and it's Bird. It's this, that, or the other. For me, it's screaming it from a mountaintop going, this is Tim Drake. So I'm wanting to put my faith in Brian Michael Bendis and going, he likes this character. He's been saying for a year that Tim Drake is the best Robin. I wish he would have been left alone as a version of a Robin. I still think that's his best version, but costumes can change, and who knows? Andy DiGenova said it on his episode that somehow things just revert back to putting Tim back in a version of a Robin costume or calling him Robin. But ironically, I have been calling him the Drake for 5 years. You're 6 years now, 100 episodes. Just affectionately, I've been calling it the Drake House, and we're all the Drakes, and this, that, or the other. I would be lying if there's some part of me going, did Brian Michael Bendis listen to the show? Like, I will flip out if I read the next issue of Young Justice and a character says everyone loves the Drake. I get it. He's naming himself after a villainous version of himself, but at the end of the day, and I've said it multiple times, yes, I love Tim Drake as Robin. I like him as Red Robin. I liked him as Batman, when he would take on that. Even though I don't really care for the Batman Beyond universe, I was reading it when he was Batman Beyond. But at the end of the day, I am a Tim Drake fan. That's why this podcast exists. So now being able to call my favorite character Drake, I'm kind of leaning more towards the Terrence side. I don't hate it. I don't love it, but I can say the Drake, and everybody knows who that is. And I'm not talking about in comic universe. I'm talking about if I say Drake, somebody's going to go, oh, Tim Drake. I get the eye roll, but so I feel better about it now that I'm almost a month removed from it. Again, am I jumping up and down and going, I'm trying to sway everybody over? I'm just saying, let's give it a moment and let's see how it pans out. So, all right, enough of all of that. Let's get back to episode 100 of the show.
Hey, can I say what I wanted to add to this part, which I hopefully you guys don't mind, and we can talk about this, is what we want to see. We know we're going to see this brown costume coming, but what would you, if you could just wave a magic wand or had the power, what would you want to see from Tim Drake in the next, till we hit podcast 200 or whatever? And here's my idea. I want to see A Lonely Place of Dying in some kind of live action or animated movie. And it's so hard because you have to do all this backstory for Jason Todd's death and Tim Drake and all that. But
not if you've seen Hush. Well, you don't have to. They just change stuff.
Well, we were doing it correctly. But here's my thought on it here, and I was wondering what you guys think. The Titans TV show already has Dick Grayson, already has Jason Todd in place. If they would kill Jason Todd in a way, we've already seen in the Titans show this vision of a grim and dark Batman just killing everybody and going to pieces. If they could kill Jason Todd in one of the Titans shows... Oh,
I think Jason Todd's going to die for sure.
Yeah.
And then
if not this season, it's in that show sometime, they'll kill Jason Todd. I think, is your point, Terrence? I think, if we are going to see a live-action Tim Drake at all, it's going to be in Titans.
Right.
At some point.
And they could do an adaptation of A Lonely Place of Dying where Batman starts to go off the rail. They've already shown Dick Grayson have this horrible vision of a unhinged Batman. So you already have that. You could have, Tim Drake doing the investigation, riding his bike, trying to convince Dick Grayson he's got to be Robin again. Dick Grayson will kind of believe him because he's seen this vision. You'd probably have to integrate the other Titans in it and flesh it out and all that. But I think that over a season could be like The Lonely Place of Dying that we could have at some point. That's my dream, I guess.
Ryan, you want to go with yours?
What exactly was the question?
Just something you'd like to see out of the next year or two.
Oh, out of Tim Drake. Tim Drake. So, I would like to see Tim Drake in a book where he has more of the spotlight than in a Titans type of book. I like him. I've never... I enjoy him when he's in Teen Titans or when... Well, I can't really even say that because I've read some of the Jeff Johns Teen Titans run and I've enjoyed that stuff, but it's never been my preferred thing. And then, of course, I read a lot of and disliked the New 52 Teen Titans and so I can't really say I like him in the Teen Titans because I really kind of don't. So, and I've only read a couple issues so far of this new Young Justice, and we've just talked about how we're not exactly looking forward to the future there. So, I just want to see Tim Drake as a more featured character in Gotham City, interacting with Batman and Batman family members. I mean, it's kind of interesting that we've been talking about 100 episodes and big important events, and of course, A Lonely Place of Living was probably probably in retrospect, was one of the biggest Tim Drake events that there has been in the past few years, and and we covered it here. We covered James Tynan's entire Detective Comics run on Batman on Film, all three of us, and who else was on that show?
Was it Pete Vera?
Pete Vera, yes, because Pete reviewed the whole run for BOF. Yeah, so that was a great episode. Everybody go back and listen to that. I just want to see that. I just want to see Tim back in Gotham, interacting with characters that I like him to interact with, like Batman, like the other Robins, like Stephanie Brown. Like, has she been in Young Justice some? I've heard that she's in it a little bit, right? Like, have they picked up some of the threads from the end of Detective? I heard that they did, but I didn't know if it was satisfying.
Yes, it was. James had said he and Bendis had asked him, like, all right, if you were going to wrap this up, how would you land this with Tim and Stephanie? So they worked together on that issue. Tynan's unaccredited on it, but he said, he was given like bullet points,
consulted.
Yeah, and it's a very satisfying read. And don't quote me on this.
I'll have to catch up with it.
It's issue 4. Don't quote me on it. But yeah, it's very good. The conversation feels exactly like, this is what they were doing, and that's good. It starts solving the memory issue that the heroes have been having since Rebirth.
Okay.
So little seed for you.
Just in a that makes me a little bit more hopeful, because I do want to catch up with Young Justice, especially before this. Yeah, I just want to, and it's great. I like having Tim Drake in multiple books because that just makes him that much more important of a character. So it'd be nice if he could stay in Young Justice, but I just want to see him in Gotham doing more Batman type stuff, because that's my bread and butter with Tim Drake. That's where I want to see him doing stuff.
For me, I would like, with the new DC animated universe movies that are coming out, there is not a Batman movie currently going to be in 2020, but they're bringing back the animated shorts that are a bonus to the DVDs or Blu-rays or digital, whatever. There is next year going to be a Death in the Family animated short that they are going to do. So I'm looking at that going, is that a doorway that they're going to do this animated short to bring in because it's the Death in the Family where they're going to bring in Jason Todd, they're going to kill him. Does that open the door then, Terrence, for us to get a Lonely Place of Dying? Probably not, but that would be my goal, is to see an animated short if I can't get live action. But because
we're not exactly clear if those new animated shorts are in the continuity.
Yeah, it may just be an animated short, like, here it is. We're going to tell this 20-minute, not even 15-minute little interlude, and then there you go. So,
yeah, because in the main continuity, they've skipped of that DC animated universe. They went straight from Nightwing to Damian.
Yeah.
Right. So they've skipped Jason Todd and Tim Drake.
Right.
Yeah.
So the other thing I would like, if he's not in a team book, I would like to see him back in a solo book, or a version of a solo book with the other Robins, but something that I really liked that I didn't know I wanted until I saw it is the Young Justice animated cartoon series that just wrapped up season 3.
Season 3.
There is a Batman Inc. team led by Tim Drake Robin, Stephanie Brown, Orphan, and then Arrowette. So it's a 3 females on the team, and then Tim Drake is leading that team. And their one episode was glorious. They were fighting Clayface and the Mad Hatter, and I was like, I didn't know I wanted Tim Drake to. That would be a book I would read with Stephanie, Orphan, and Arrowette. Was just
a Gotham Knights,
a Gotham Knights version.
Yeah,
and it was
and maybe that might, because I just said I don't like Tim when he's in a team book, but that's not exactly true either, because Detective Comics was a team book with Tim in it.
Right.
But it was all Gotham Batman related characters, and what you just described is still kind of that.
Yeah. And they were working with Batman, and he was, sent him on missions and stuff.
Yeah.
But that episode was a Tim Drake focused episode, and doing the team. And then in that episode, he's dating Cassie while Stephanie is right next to him. So that was kind of cool to see how that plays out. But that would be my dream, is some book like that. It's cool to see him with Connor and Bart and Cassie, Wonder Girl. That's cool. But we say it on the show all the time. The Robin book won 183 issues, and I think Tom Panarese had said it on episode 98 that that's nothing to sneeze at. There's books that barely make it to 30, and then if you tack on the 26 issues with the Red Robin series, that's darn near 200 issues of a solo series of a character where you can clearly go, he can hold his own book, and held it for a decade.
And the character himself has been around since 1990?
Yeah.
Or 89?
89, yeah.
90.
Was his August of 89.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's Tim Drake 30.
30, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I do math.
I talk good.
Yeah.
So we'll do this section lightning round here. Just some thoughts. So these are interviews and events that we have covered through the podcast through 100 episodes. The BBC audio drama for The Legends of Robin and then the Nightfall company thing. So when I was doing the episodes by myself, I thought, I got a way to spice this up. Oh, I've got all these radio dramas that, the UK produced. So I just thought that was really cool to be able to revisit and putting that stuff in. And that started putting seeds in of I wonder if I could do one of these. So did you guys have any thoughts of me deciding to use those instead of a lieu of a synopsis of me reading it, of going, I'm just going to let the BBC do the dirty work for me? Let's start with Terrence.
Yeah, I had never actually listened to those. I knew they existed, but I never heard them. So it was really enjoyable. There's something about the voice of the guy who does Batman. At first it was very jarring and this is not Batman. This is some English guy trying to sound American. That's not a Gotham City accent, But after a while, it really grew on me, and I really liked his Batman voice. I don't know why. I just really like that. The only bad part is I wish there were more. I wish they had a Prodigal and a Legacy and a Contagion and a No Man's Land and all those. But, I really, really enjoyed that. And I know we got a lot of positive feedback about them as well, too.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Ryan?
Oh, yeah. So I think I've probably mentioned this on either the BOF show or on this show. I had gotten the audio drama as a kid because they had advertised it in the books around the time it was coming out, and I just assumed as a kid that it was a movie. I was like, "Oh, great! It's the complete story. It's a movie." And so my parents had to. That was back in the days where there wasn't Amazon. You couldn't just go on Amazon and we just get it or whatever. Or Amazon, or just go to iTunes and just buy it, right. The audio files, So they had to I remember my mom told me later they had to call in or send in a money order or whatever, a special just to order it separate, right, and have it come. And they were really excited to give it to me, it was around some either a birthday or Easter or some holiday. And they gave it to me, and I open it, and it's these tapes, and I'm like, what is this? I was so confused about it. I was like, oh, what? I thought it'd be like a animated movie or something. I thought it'd be the whole thing. But I had this initial disappointment, but then I got my little cassette player and some headphones and went into a dark room and just close my eyes and listen to it, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is better than I could ever imagine. It's literally like a movie, in your mind while you just listen to it. And it was, and having read Nightfall all the way, well, as complete as I could have gotten at the time through the trades, because the trades, as we all know, were not complete. They didn't have all the story. Right. Yeah, that's how I experienced storylines like The Search for the first time. I had never actually read any of those issues because they were, I didn't know as a kid I need to go to the store and ask for Justice League Task Force 5 or whatever, or whatever it was. But yeah, being able to sit there and listen to the entirety of one of my favorite stories in 3 hours or whatever, was great. And so it always, and that was probably very influential in and of itself in cementing Nightfall as one of my favorite Batman stories. Specifically, was that audio drama. So it was great having it be used on this show, to cover the issues that we were covering.
We had our first celebrity, as far as this podcast is concerned. I know Marv Wolfman created Tim Drake, but Chuck Dixon wrote the Bible for Tim Drake, which is, what we've been talking about primarily on the show. But getting a chance to interview Chuck Dixon was a surreal experience that if you listen to the very end of episode 51, where we interviewed Chuck Dixon, you can hear Ryan and Terrence and I all take this audible, gasp or sigh of, I can't believe we just talked to Chuck Dixon. What I kept thinking the whole time during that interview is, he wrote my Batman growing up. He wrote Nightwing and Catwoman and Robin and the whole Batman universe, and everything that I fell into as a comic book fan was all written by Chuck Dixon. And here we are, please don't let me sound like an idiot asking questions to this guy, and he couldn't have been sweeter. So I know we've kind of talked about it before, but in case somebody's new to the podcast and I didn't know you guys interviewed Chuck Dixon, does that still stick with you, Terrence, that interview? And do you still have that moment of oh yeah, I got a chance to talk to Chuck Dixon?
A little bit, but the thing was, he was so cool and so nice and so down to earth that after a few minutes and a few questions, it was like we were talking to our uncle, or we were talking to hey, what was it like back then, or just a cool older brother or something. He really had a way to just kind of put us at ease, and he never was he never gave us that attitude of oh, I can't believe I'm doing this rinky-dink little podcast. I'm Chuck Dixon. I should be interviewed by Fangoria magazine, for crying out loud. He was just, he treated our questions as if we were some really legitimate, hard-hitting news source or something. So, and he gave us really thoughtful, insightful answers. And I'll always just remember when we asked him about third base, and he's like, "What the heck? I don't know what that is." So, yeah, that was just tons of fun.
Yeah, Ryan, you got any thoughts there?
Yeah, it was. We had been just talking about it forever because he is so influential for Tim Drake specifically, both in crafting. He picked up the ball, but the ball was so early on in Tim's trajectory as a character that he not only picked up the ball and ran with it and made it better, from the first Robin miniseries all the way through that, the vast majority of the solo series. And then upon covering the books, finding out that he was writing half the books at DC at the time, and he was making them all connect in his own little Dixon verse of things, and they never really felt shortchanged. It was all part of this larger fabric. They're books that you could just sit down and read and feel like you're looking at a window into this universe, and nobody really gets shortchanged. I mean, it's just the best of comics from that era, you know what I mean? So, and that's not even counting, and that's without counting the huge things of Nightfall. If Nightfall being the crucible of rediscovering and reforming not just Batman, but other books and characters in the Batman universe, like Nightwing, like the way that Catwoman came out of that, like Azrael, and those are so formative of when I first was exposed to comic books in a major way as a kid. And that's why it's a big part of why I'm still fans of those characters today. So getting to talk to him about it was great. But the fact that he was so excited to just talk about it with us, and the fact that he remembered so much stuff about all of it. Sometimes you read interviews with people, or even if you get lucky to talk to people on shows, either they're like, yeah, well, I just, it was a job, or I don't remember everything, or that was so many years ago, or, but it always seems like he really has a true passion for the work and the things he does. I mean, he's kind of a unique person because, like, he's probably, I think I've seen some, like, either news articles or Wikipedia articles or something, or credits, like, he's probably written more individual comic books than anybody alive or dead that's ever written comic books. Like the number of comics he's written is, like, staggering, you know? But so, yeah, just having him on this show and then having him on, we were able to have him on this show. Have we had him on twice?
We had him once here, and then you were able to pull him over for the...
Yes, and we definitely, we had him on BOF to talk about Nightfall for its 25th. It's the 25th year anniversary, and that was BOF 115, and we all had him on BOF and talking about Nightfall and Bane and Azrael specifically, and that's great because he's like such a prominent figure in forming, helping Tim Drake, co-creating Bane, like all the comics he's written. So yeah, it's definitely a big get to be able to talk to him about all that stuff.
We'll go through some of these. We're getting a little long in the show, but it's the 100th episode, so you'll have that. Something that, I've got to hear, I had mentioned Ollie's on episode 66. Just really quick, out of the, what feels like hundreds of books that we bought, have any of us cracked open any of the books and actually read the book, any of the books that we bought back in episode 66? I have read one out of the...
That is insane, and also probably par for the course.
I'm glad to have him, and it's a great resource when I'm doing stuff and get asked to be on podcasts, or even go, do I even have that Batman issue? I'm like, oh, I've got that book. So it's my goal over the winters to really sit down and read. I just wondered if you guys had read any of the books.
I got the Frank Quietly big hardcover coffee table book, and I got the Brian Boland big hard.
Yeah, I did too.
Coffee table
the
book.
Art of Brian Boland.
Yeah, and those are really just looking at pictures. It's not really a story, and I've flipped through those several times. I can't remember sitting down reading one of the books, and in fact, I got tired of looking at them. So there's this app called Declutter, where you can scan things and sell them. And I ended up selling a bunch of them back on Declutter for a loss. But it was like, you know what? For a couple bucks.
Wait, for a loss on the Ollie's prices?
Yeah. So, but it's the thing about Declutter is they buy it and then they resell it. So it's not like eBay where you got to find a buyer and ship each thing out individually and stuff. You scan the barcode of a CD or a book and they tell you what they'll pay for it. And it's usually less than $1. And, then you just pack it up and they do free shipping, and then you just kind of get rid of the stuff. So it's really more if you're just tired of looking at stuff and just want to get rid of it and make a little something.
Did you sell all your pops?
I've sold this year not on Declutter doesn't take pops, so you got to go through eBay and stuff. I've sold about 50 of them this year. So
man. And me and Rob have bought like 50.
I know, it was funny. Yeah, you guys...
We traded places.
For years, Rob kept saying, like, I don't buy those. I'm not into those.
I did too. I was like, I hate Pops. I don't really like them.
And then they changed the box to black and started to do Batman, and it was like, ooh, these are cool. Yeah.
And Terrence is like, you dumb...
Well, yeah, no, I was more like, I feel your pain. I know what it's like there. Yeah, it's hard. Once you start, it's hard to stop. Yeah.
Yeah. At least I know the 80th anniversary is almost over. There's one more set that I want. The Dark Knight is with the light up bat signal, but that'll be okay. There's a couple other things. I had this note in here. It says, Terrence, what would become the cold openings of the show? Making fun of Rob. Catchphrases of Terrence like, how many holes does Tim Drake have, Rob? Ooh, catch me unawares. Like, just the silly banter that we'll have in some of these episodes that I'm like, I need an opening for the show. So I'm like, where was Terrence in the audio file? Let's see what he says here. Or when you say phrases like, hey, you don't have to put this in the show, that's usually that's going to be a cold opening for the show.
Well, there's so many times I hear it, I'm listening, and I hear myself say to you, like, yeah, edit this out, Rob. Don't put this in, Rob. And
there were a couple I missed, and I was like, ooh.
Yeah, and the funniest ones are the ones that are just organic. Like, I don't even know how we all started saying fluidity and fluidity. I think I was making fun of you.
Well, Rob looked it up. Like, in the one episode, Rob, like, had a masterful editor's note where he explains the entire history of, like, where it came from.
Yeah.
Fluidity. But it was organic. Like, the things, you just say things, Rob, that, like, I could take in a double meaning or a bad meaning, and you don't even realize it, and you're just saying it, and it just cracks me up. Especially because you get like late at night, and you've been like giddy, and you've been it's in this little room with no windows doing podcasting, and you say something like, "Oh, he fingered his throat," if you will, and I just can't stop laughing. Yeah. One of my all-time favorites, though, was when your washing machine came through the wall.
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
And the audio of your wife in the background when you're like, should I get off the podcast? And she's like, yeah, you think?
Yeah, that I played that back for her. She's like, the microphone picked that up? I'm like, yeah, it did. She's like, did you take it out? I said, no, I enhanced it so people could hear it.
I made it the cold.
Yeah.
I made it a cliffhanger.
Literally, yeah. The quality of the audio, Ryan found two good programs. One caused me the longest editing other than the radio drama because Terrence was out of sync by 3 seconds.
Oh my
So I had to go through every time Terrence spoke. I had to cut his audio so it would match. But now we're on cast, so the days of dropped calls and all these things. I've only had
audio sync.
Weird audio syncs. The only problem I've had with cast was with Tom Panarese, that for whatever reason it kept kicking him off. So we actually had to go back to Skype, and I had not been on Skype in a year, so I had to do some updates. I was like, oh my gosh. And going back to Tom's first time on the podcast, Skype didn't record that call, and luckily he recorded his part of it, so I had to say, hey, thanks for recording the call, thanks for being a guest, but I need the audio file. So cast has made things a lot easier, a lot cleaner, and not having to have the real tinny sound like some episodes I was listening to today.
And you get individual voice tracks for everybody. Yeah.
And sometimes Terrence would sound really tinty, and the next time he would sound really, really bright and full, and it was weird going through some of the earlier episodes of the show. So thank you for finding cast, and it is worth the $10 a month easily without having all the audio issues.
Well, the funniest one I think was the Bat Fan guys. When I joined that podcast, they had told me about the one time that they had recorded for like 4 hours and it didn't record, and they wasted all that time. So I was always paranoid. So we would always double record. So you would hit record and I would hit record, and then there was one time you contacted me and said, hey, mine didn't record. Did yours record? And I listened back, and it only recorded me, not you. And you had to go in and re-record all your parts, but you had to, like, remember. So you had to listen to my answer to your question, figure out what the question was, and then and then fit it in the time. Like, oh. And I was like, you could have made me look so bad because you could have changed all my answers. When I'm like, yeah, about 3-4 times maybe. You could have been like, so Terrence, how many times have you been arrested for public intoxication? Oh, yeah, no, about 3-4 times. You know. So luckily you kept it clean and kept it to Tim Drake. Yeah.
Yeah. That was really nice of me. You're welcome. The check's in the mail.
And I don't know if this will ever fit in, but one of my other favorite moments, I was driving with my daughter in the car. This was before I was even on the podcast, and I was listening to the podcast, and I think you were on like episode 7 at that time. And we were listening about 10-15 minutes, and she had no idea what it was, but she just turns to me, and she was like 4th grade, maybe elementary school. She just turns to me and she's like, wow, this guy really likes this Tim person a lot. We've been talking about him for like 15 minutes, and I'm like, actually, the whole podcast is about this, and he's got 7 more episodes all about him as well. And she's like, really? Wow. And so now it's like we're up to 100. And I'm like, oh, yeah, and by the way, this Tim guy, he doesn't really exist. He's just a fictional character. Like,
it lives in my mind.
but you're just that guy who really likes that Tim person. Yeah.
We've mentioned the Bowling Green Conference at the beginning of the show, and just what a cool event that was, getting a chance to meet Ryan. Another interview that we had was James Tynan that I couldn't have planned.
I wish I could have been on that.
Yeah.
But that was a great episode to get him, yeah.
And I couldn't have planned that better if I tried. That the audio drama played out. He got to hear that and was very appreciative of it. And then it was just kind of like Chuck Dixon. He just was full of information, and again was another one of those, like, it was one thing to talk to a comic book creator, I wouldn't say of the past, because, Chuck is still writing, but to talk to somebody that is currently writing books right now was kind of, you could tell he was guarded of what he could say, what he couldn't say, but I thought that was another cool interview we were able to land. Any thoughts on Tynan real quick? I know Ryan wasn't able to be there on that, but just how that experience, Terrence?
Well, you told me you sent him the audio drama. So
Yeah.
I was like so nervous for you, because really I had nothing to do with the audio drama other than choke myself and say a couple of lines for Anarchy. You did you just, from getting people on to writing it to producing it to sound effects, you did everything. So I was just thinking to myself, like, oh, I hope he says something nice about it to Rob. I hope he doesn't badmouth it to Rob. I hope he's not like, what the heck did you guys do? I'm suing you for... And then he came on and he was like, I think he said, like, it's freaking awesome. And I was like, oh, thank you. I'm like, Rob is probably like the happiest boy on Christmas morning ever for that. So that was really cool for you. Like, if he had been like, guys, that really sucked, I wouldn't have taken that personally. I would have been like, well, the Anarchy part was okay, But I was really happy for you that he liked it so much.
So this is going to be the end of episode 100. It's a little bittersweet that we're here, and the future for the podcast, as far as the ideas that I have, is to keep trucking on like we have been, hopefully being able to get some other creators onto the podcast. But I feel like I've been a broken record for a while. It's still getting into the body. We're only at issue 24, 25 of the Robin series. But when
Rob, Ryan and I have been talking, and going forward, we're gonna do it alone. We're actually, this will be your last episode. We're gonna kick you off, and it's gonna be the Ryan and Terry podcast for now on. Yeah.
You know what? I haven't been kicked off the show in a long time. So.
Oh man, it's true.
we were waiting for episode 100. We figured,
that was a good stopping point.
We'll let him do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I got to do 100, unlike Tom King is going to get to do. So I'll just have to do. I don't mean that, Tom King. I don't mean that, Tom King. Technically, he will, but still. Yeah, I want to continue on through the Robin series, and with both of you guys here like we have been, and when the schedules are working, and to be able to go through these and see where the podcast takes us. I think we're going to be going into some ground that I think probably the three of us probably haven't read some of these middle stories.
Oh no, for sure.
Yeah, I mean the marquee ones like Legacy and Contagion and No Man's Land, those are going to be fun to kind of go through and revisit for the first time. But I
actually haven't read No Man's Land, so
yeah, and No Man's Land is going to be fun to kind of to go through some of these, and we'll probably do it through the eyes of Tim Drake, to try and go through all the No Man's Land. Like, okay, here's issue, I'm just pulling this out of my butt, like 45 of Robin in No Man's Land. We're going to come into the story when Tim comes into the story. So we'll do some type of overviews and things like that. But
yeah, and No Man's Land is very sprawling compared to like Nightfall. It makes Nightfall look like a cakewalk, because Nightfall was like very, here's Nightfall Part 2, here's Nightfall Part 18. But No Man's Land, it's just what's going on, and there's not real, there's it's just happening, and there's individual arcs within that. So I have like a 3-issue thing in Batman, like a 4-issue thing in Shadow of the Bat or whatever, so like there's a lot of little individual mini arcs within the bigger one.
But it's going to be fun to go through some of these issues that maybe I read once, or as I was collecting, there were holes in my collection where I was just like, I never bought issue 43 of Robin, and I only recently found it in 2017. So it's going to be fun to read through some of this stuff and to still know that it's tied into other Batman events. And Terrence is always really good at saying stuff like, hey, this is actually calling back to a Detective Comics story that Chuck Dixon was writing. So
I love that stuff, because that context helps me. Because when I read, I think the last stuff we were reading it would just cut to like some police procedural stuff, and I'm like, well, why are they doing this? And then Terrence was like, oh, because that's like a hole leading into something else that's going to happen in another book or something.
Yeah, there's a lot with the GCPD that ties the 4 books together. That's like the common thread is like the Bullock and the Gordons and Sarah Gordon taking over as commissioner and all that stuff was little by little in each book, yeah.
But from me to both of you, thank you both very much for being brothers in this podcast, being really good friends. It's something I look forward to every couple weeks when we get a chance to do one of these, or if it happens to be, all right, we're going to record once a month, but we talk for 2.5 hours and we're like, hey, we get to break this up into a couple episodes. So it's a little surreal to be here at episode 100, but it's even better that the two of you were able to be here on episode 100 and the schedules work. So thank you both for being really good friends, and just being cool and being a part of this just means the world. And I can't say thank you enough to the both of you and to everybody that has listened to this show and has supported us. And I think the show is just going to continue to get better and better as things go. And the future for Tim Drake is up in the air for Young Justice. But I'm going to throw it back to you guys one last time, is what you're looking forward to podcast-wise and just your thoughts of reaching episode 100. Let's start with Ryan.
I've been part of this show first as a the annoying, first as a guest and then as like the annoying neighbor that just shows up every episode and then never leaves, to just an actual co-host. I mean, I've been here since BVS came out. Yep. That was the first show. It wasn't even Tim Drake related. Yeah. It was that was the end. It was like, well, he's Batman on film, so let's do a BVS show. And so that was March 2016 was when I started, and I forget which episode that was. Yeah, but it's probably been like 50 episodes. Yeah, but more than that, I guess, because episode 51
was Chuck.
Was Chuck Dixon. Yeah, so it was quite a bit before that I was on the show. So, but yeah, it's great that we're at 100. And it's not entirely surprising that we're not that deep into the solo Robin series yet. But that's because this show is the roadmap for this show is always going to have that Tim Drake chronology as the backbone, but it's great that we're able to also do things like this Road to 100 or the audio drama or the interviews with these industry legends and stuff. It's great that this podcast has the fluidity to be able to cover all these different things and aspects of fandom related to the best Robin, and it's just a great place to be.
Terrence, what do you got, man?
Cool. I had this weird thought today because I was thinking about the Drake and all that, and I liked the book when it first came out because I was the same age as Tim Drake. And then he stayed 16, and now I'm 45. I'm like, how'd that happen? And then I'm thinking about it. My oldest daughter, she turned 18 this year, and I'm like, holy crap, my kid is older than Tim Drake. Like, not only am I older than Tim Drake, I've got a kid who's older than Tim Drake. So it's kind of cool reading these from different perspectives as you get older. It's amazing how well the Chuck Dixon stuff still holds up after so many years. And I'm really looking forward to the next kind of few books. I'm looking forward to getting into some books that I missed because I wasn't reading comics at the time. I'm looking forward to just talking to you guys and watching Rob put his or listening to Rob put his foot in his mouth and say things he doesn't even intend to,
Can't wait to see what other appliances decide to
oh my gosh.
House.
Don't say that. My wife's go freak out. She goes, if one more thing goes wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe we can all attend the Bowling Green State University romance novel convention next year.
Yeah, I've got to try to make it. My sister's like, you need to come south. You need to come south. I'm like, I will come south, but there are two gentlemen I need to see and before you. She's like, damn it, Rob.
Yeah, and my wife loves Animal Planet and all those animal shows and National Geographic, And there's one show that's based on the Cincinnati Zoo, and there's one based on the Columbus, Ohio Zoo.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, they're great shows. And she's like, oh, we got to go. We could go. You know, they're only, like, 2.5 hours apart. We could see each zoo. And so, like, we talk about going to Ohio all the time, but one of these days we'll get up there and you can meet us at the zoo.
Wouldn't it be great if Terrence meets Rob before he meets me?
Yeah.
That would just be, that'd be fitting. But both of those zoos are great. I want to say Columbus just because it's really in our neck of the woods, but Cincinnati's got some really, really cool stuff. But this is where we're going to end episode 100. A big thank you to my two brothers, Terrence and Ryan. Check out all the shows on the Batman universe. As long as the Batman universe has been around, there's more and more shows reaching 100, reaching 200. Batgirl to Oracle is nearing 200. Bat Fans is nearing 200. There's a lot of good stuff on the podcast. Go over to Batman on Film. Ryan, you have your Azrael podcast. As we are recording this, is in the wings of getting ready to spread its flaming sword. Is that correct?
We have. Oh man, that's a great intro. Yeah, we have already recorded episode 0. We have all the branding done. The Twitter is becoming more active. We are scheduled to begin recording our shows on the Sword of Azrael miniseries tomorrow. As of that, so we're trying to. Our plan is to try to get that going, bank some shows, and get some things like and get it all kind of in the bag. Have some things for me to work with, so when it does hit, it can be a little more. It can be pretty consistent for a little while. So I'm trying to get things squared away. So it's well on its way. It's no longer the lofty, oh, it's going to happen eventually. It's actually really, really happening.
Cool.
We've already recorded some stuff, and we're going to record some more stuff tomorrow. And so it's definitely getting there.
Cool.
Hey, you had mentioned that you had bought like the whole run of Azrael, but you hadn't read it. How far into the run reading it are you now?
You know, I was, to be honest, I was waiting to cover it on the show.
Oh, wow.
Live.
Cool.
I mean, maybe, I don't know, Terrence, maybe I should just read it to be familiar with it, or maybe the show would be richer if I cover it along with the show, along with listeners. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I mean, we're going to hit spots like that I thought about, I'm going to start reading a bunch of Robin issues. That might be fun to just, for you to experience that, maybe the same way we're experiencing some of this Robin stuff, that we're going to read an issue where it's like, I had no idea that this was here. That's going to be interesting to see how you guys tackle that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most direct influence on that show is, of course, this show, trying to do the due diligence and cover, we love Tim Drake, but have you read the whole solo series? No, you know, so, and it's the same thing with Azrael. I've read Nightfall and some of the current stuff and some of the solo series, but definitely not all of it. I read the very beginning and the very end. I've said this before, I bought issues of I have like issues, I had like the first couple issues, and then I bought like the very last arc as it was releasing, because he got back in the Asbat's costume again. So that's part of it, yeah, because I want to experience that. Like, that's a character, it's Tim Drake got to 183 issues, but Azrael himself got 100 issues, and they were all written by Dennis O'Neil, and that's a gift. Like, so it's going to be really fun to explore that, but it's going to be yet another show where it's going to be kind of like this show where we're going to start out with Sword of Azrael, and then you've got the looming specter of, well, now we got to cover Nightfall again. But
that's going to be cool.
But it's going to be cool, so we're going to cover all of Nightfall, but it's going to be from the character analysis perspective of Azrael. So like,
I love
if Azrael's
security guard in Nightfall.
Yeah, so if Azrael's not in the book, then we'll probably skip over some, or do some like synopsis stuff, and then just get into the meat of like, well, what's Azrael doing here, or whatever.
That's cool.
It's gonna be just like this show. It's gonna take quite a long time to cover everything, but that's kind of the point. Yeah. So follow me on Twitter at SMB_Ryan. Follow the Batman Podcast Network at BatPod Network, and all the Azrael stuff. It's just super simple. I made it easy on you. Just go to Twitter and do at Azrael Podcast, and you'll find us.
Cool. Terrence, you got anything to plug, buddy? Damn it.
What? Oh,
No.
God. This is another joke about your holes, Rob.
Oh, damn it. I almost made the whole episode.
Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, here we go. It's
69.
It's 8 minutes after midnight. Let the laughing fit begin.
Yeah.
Rob plugged some holes.
We're going to get out of here before it gets good. On behalf of Terrence and Ryan, this is your host, Rob Myers. You've been listening to the BatmanUniverse.net. And more importantly, you've been listening to 100 episodes of Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake Comic Podcast. We'll see you guys in a few